The meeting of the Monte Sereno City Council for August 20th, 2019 will come to order. Please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Elahi?
Present.
Councilmember Labouvet?
Present.
Councilmember Luthold?
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Lawler?
Present.
Mayor Turner?
Present. So are there any changes to the orders of the day?
They're on,
Our first order of business
Madam
is-
Mayor, I'm sorry. You do need a report out from your closed session.
We already did.
Oh, they did.
Yeah. The first order of business is presentations, and our speaker for today is Dan Lawson, and he's going to speak for the Los Gatos Morning Rotary Clause for a Cause annual event.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Again, my name is Dan Lawson. I'm here on behalf of Los Gatos Morning Rotary. And I'd like to start by saying thank you all very much for the support you've given our club over the years. Last year, you were very generous in giving Clause for a Cause a donation, and I understand this year you did the same to our event in plein air, which is, both are very, very important to the community, and I hope all of you have been to both or one of these events. But I'm here tonight to, originally my intent was to come and ask for a donation to help support us for this year. Our beneficiary is Lighting for Literacy, and if you're unaware of Lighting for Literacy, it's a solar-powered lighting system that we're installing. Our club is installing in off-grid countries, and we're installing these systems in schools, homes, hospitals, and very recently in Africa, we installed in a birthing center where women in Africa were, this is very moving to me actually, that we're having such a profound impact in so many different places of the world. But we installed in a birthing center the solar system so women, instead of giving birth by candlelight or lanterns, we had installed an LED lighting system that was solar paneled that really changed things for the doctors and, as you can well imagine, for the women that were having their children. But with that said, I do understand I might be a little late to this party of asking for funding, because I understand the budget may have already been allocated and funds already distributed. So if that is the case, then I would humbly ask that you might consider us for 2020, and that would be very helpful and useful to us into next year. Also would like to invite you to participate in our event by sponsoring a table. I have some flyers, a little postcard here. If I could hand them out to you, I would ask that you consider hosting a table of 10, or if you are unable to do that, please come and enjoy the event. It's a wonderful evening of music, food. Oh, thank you. Music, food, and a lot of smiling faces of people from our community. And I know it's one of the larger, probably the biggest party in Los Gatos. It's going to be at the Los Gatos Lodge, and would love to see you there. I also have I've given you my business card. If you have an interest in getting a table, please call me directly, and I'll be happy to arrange that. We currently have a discounted rate for another week or so to obtain a table of 10. So thank you very much for your time. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I assume you're going to be serving lobster over there?
You know, that's a very important point. Yeah, I should tell you what's being served. It's all-you-can-eat lobster, hence the name Clause for a Cause. We have fresh Maine lobster flown in from the East Coast, Maine, of course. We also have CB Hannigan's from Chris Benson, who was one of the owners of CB's. He's doing the barbecue for us. We're going to barbecue salad, clam chowder, and live music. And lobster is all you can eat from 5:30 to 8:30. And then we'll have the music playing till 10 o'clock. And it's a sea of smiling people and smiling faces. I love this event. It's wonderful to go to it.
You have a special chef who's making the clam chowder?
We do. We are spreading our wings a little bit. I don't know if you've heard of JV's Chowder, but he's taking on the reins of doing the clam chowder this year, and he's an award-winning clam chowder chef. So he'll be sharing the load of preparing food for all of our guests. We expect to have 1,100 people there.
So are you going to have salsa and bachata dancing?
You know, I can speak to I can speak to some of the dancing. The music is actually quite fun, and I've been known to lead a conga line every once in a while. So if you're there, I'm going to look for you, and you can jump on in with me. But no, you're free to dance in any form you'd like, and it's encouraged. We're actually considering having a dance contest as well, so we might do that.
Any questions from the council? No. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time. Have a nice evening.
Okay, so the next order of business is oral communications, and Andrea, we don't have anybody else speaking? No? Okay, so let's move on to written. Oh. And it's Brian Mikachuk.
Yes, it is. I just wanted to thank Burton Craig and the council for going through with the filming and the recording of council meetings. I think it's really good. And I know that there's some teething problems with the technology and everything, and I know Terry's been working really hard on that. But I just want to say that you're making progress in it, and it's really good. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Our next order of business is written communications, and we have four. All four of them are on the user and regulatory fees from Philippa and Jack Alvis, Kathy Smith, Ruth Nelson, Dale, and Florence Barrett. So the next order of business is the consent calendar. And we have 7 items. We're not going to take it one at a time because I know there are some questions from the council. So let me take the first one, which is the minutes of the August 6th and the special meeting as well as the regular meeting. Are there any questions about that? No? Let me move on to number 2, the warrant list. Questions?
No.
No?
I
Oh,
had,
wow.
I'd sent in a question and received an answer back to a couple of questions. One was on the litigation services. There were 2 bills of around about $1,000 each. I understand those are related to an outstanding litigation case, so we don't need to go into that particularly any further. The other was a question about the website hosting. It's just listed here as website hosting for 12 months. With BMI Imaging. I'd asked about that. Maybe Terry can share the answer with everybody as to what that is, that it's not website hosting per se. It sounds like it's more than that.
Well, no, it actually, and I did respond to this question to all the council. It is BMI helps us with our imaging of our documents. That's a separate fee that we have to pay per page, but then the documents are uploaded. It's a web-based site for maintaining the records. So, and that's the yearly fee that we have to pay for that.
Is that the website that we see, or is this back end behind the website?
It's an internal one. And I have mentioned to the council that I have started some discussions with the city clerk on, how we might, create a more public portal so that those documents could be searched. Many cities do have their resolutions and other things that are available through their website, and so it's definitely possible. So we've started chatting about that.
Thanks. That's all.
Anything else? So let's move to treasurer's reports. Any questions?
I have a question. So, as we, on other topics, we've been going through some of the overall benefits and cost to the city, so forth. And so, for the expenditures report for the year end, I was looking at the personnel areas, and I just am curious, in what categories do the fringe benefits and the car allowance, where are those included in these breakouts? Or, which categories? So let's take one at a time. So,
If you let, I can go run and go get my copy.
okay.
Go ahead.
And you were talking about the monthly revenue and expenditures reports or the treasurer's report?
It's actually the treasurer's report, but it's the final, it's the year-end June 19, so it's a complete 2019, or as of 2019 accounting.
Okay.
And so, for example, you know, if I just do back of the napkin calculation of fringe benefits times the employees, you know, it's around 60K. Yet if I look at sort of benefits allowance, deferred compensation, and perhaps dental insurance, which I think those things are really around the fringe, it doesn't really add up to 60K. So I'm not, and then the car allowance is another 33.5K. And so I'm just not sure where some of these numbers actually show in this accounting.
Yeah, unfortunately, our finance officer's not here, so I don't know if I can answer your questions, but I certainly can, if you can email me those, I could certainly get an answer when she gets back, but let me take a quick look.
I don't know if we should take meeting time for this. This is kind of a detailed accounting question, so.
So do you want to move?
So maybe we can move forward. So I'll email you those questions. It's more regarding, you know, we get a lot of letters of people saying we need to be very fiscally responsible and transparent. And if I'm having trouble figuring out where mapping some of these expenses into the reporting, I'm sure other people are struggling with that too, so.
Okay, so.
Sorry,
are there any other
sorry,
questions?
I did have one relating to the treasurer's reports. And this is something that I brought up before, and I don't think I have an answer. I think city manager was going to help look into this, but I wanted to check what the status is. And particularly, I was noticing the revenue related to the cable provider. I assume that's Comcast, or maybe it's Frontier, and it's a contract we have. I wanted to get the details of the underlying contract, because I know a lot of
Yes, and
citizens
I-
wish we weren't there.
I think, this I did not know. Yeah, it's a state franchise, not a contract. I think I had inquired with the city clerk about the end date on that. Did I not ask you about that at some
I
point?
can definitely email that out.
Yeah, you had asked me and I had sent that on.
Yeah.
So we'll circle back with you on an answer to that, because I was trying, you wanted to know the end date, or when the franchise agreement was up again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what's entailed in all of that, so.
So there used to be each individual city, county had franchise agreements with cable companies. The state took that over, and now there's a statewide franchise. So it's something that we don't control. We're basically just subject to it, and they get their rights through the state. But we can get a copy and let you know the terms of that.
Okay, because that seems strange. My understanding was when they ran the cables, a franchise or a contract was granted for a period of time so they could recover their fixed costs, and after that, we were free to do as we wished with the cables and with not having a single source provider and a monopoly. And so you're saying that's changed? Okay, so.
And it may be different in terms of infrastructure versus the ability to provide the service to the communities. Maybe there's a distinction, but we can look into that.
Because that's what I want to look into. I don't see, after the initial infrastructure cost and contract that was committed to run that infrastructure, why we should be locked in to a single carrier or provider, especially now when there's going to be over-the-air options. We might be able to reach out to someone who can provide an over-the-air option if we're not locked into an exclusive contract. So.
My understanding is you're not locked in. It's whoever, they get a franchise from the state, and then they can come to the community. Perhaps some companies are interested and some aren't. But we'll get you that information and bring it back.
Sounds good.
Okay, so any other questions?
That's it.
That's it? Okay, so,
Maybe, yeah, I'll just throw one more in. Not sure if it completely applies, but since we're have attached here the year-end revenues expenditure report. I know this has to still go through audit, but I definitely want to get into that. I was looking at the audit from 2018, and we're still have outstanding pension liabilities and other pension obligations, you know, almost totaling $1 million, even after a pay down in, I think, what, 2018? I mean,
16
16 or 17?
or 15, I think.
No, well,
Oh,
so the report
16.
in June of 18, so I think in the previous year, there was a pay down of $513,000, or sorry, no, of $460,000. But we still have almost $1 million in outstanding obligations under pensions. And so I definitely want to get into that at some point.
Well, that is definitely misleading, and at this moment, I don't have any of the documentation in front of me to go over the details on that. So I'd be more than happy to meet with you and talk about that.
So can we
Right.
put that under future agenda items to?
Right.
to-
I believe what you're referring to is the portion that's, that includes the potential liabilities for the future that include health care for all employees if they were necessarily to retire from here, which isn't necessarily the truth. But that's something I would also have to check with the finance officer. As I always say to all the council, it's extremely helpful if you email me your questions in advance, so that way I can, you know, have the right people here and be best prepared.
And I think I recall some conversation about that line item at the budgeting
During the
process,
budget
that there
session.
was something related to a change in the way things were accounted for as opposed to an actual liability.
Correct, it has to be a worst-case scenario, and because as of
No, that's
this,
mischaracterizing too. It's not, no, there's a current liability and then they put a plus and a minus around it. So there is a current liability that lives on our balance sheet.
but we are currently, and I will double-check if we made the most recent payment, up to date on our unfunded liability in terms of what we owe to the CalPERS system, but I will double-check with Sue to make sure.
So let's move to item 4, which is monthly revenue and expenditure reports. Are there any questions from the council?
I had just one thing I wanted to open up, and I didn't put this in my note, but I was just wondering, in terms of reporting at the year end of the June cycle, Terry, I was wondering if you had any comments, other than the ones that appeared at the end of this. There were 5 or 6 items that had been called out on comments. Did you have anything else that you wanted to highlight for us about any of the either numbers that came in high or numbers that came in low on that?
No, and I'm not sure that Sue has completed her end of the year of counting. I think we continue through the end of August before we do that. She has to, what she calls a chargeback.
Okay.
And I don't know that she's completed that yet.
I noticed and I appreciated that the month in June does have a series of bullet items on the last page explaining the revenue and the expenditures that were either over or under by any meaningful amount. And I was just wondering if you had anything further, other than the ones that have been bullet pointed, that bring to our attention.
We had made a commitment to do that, and in this case, just due to time constraints, we were unable to do it for that particular report. But we have committed to, you know, highlighting any of the major discrepancies and trying to, you know, give a description of why.
I think that'll help us continue to plan well for the following
Yeah,
budget cycle.
absolutely.
Thanks.
Okay, anything else?
No?
Let's move to item 5, Site and Architecture Commission expansion of duties. Questions, comments? No, we're okay with that?
I'll make a comment. This resolution was introduced in the previous, I guess, 2 meetings, or maybe even 1 meeting. And I just think that it's important that we identify let me back up a minute. So the Site and Architecture team is really a jewel for Monte Sereno. It's currently staffed with very competent architects and a land use lawyer and a construction person, and also has some resident input on it also. And they're all residents, right? And so it's really nice that we have the residents taking a look at development projects in the city. And so the intent of this resolution is really to make a city priority around, would we like developments to go before the Site and Architecture Committee and expand those powers to look at things like zonings and other types of site development and subdivisions and so forth. And so this actually isn't binding, but it creates basically an objective of the city to try to do this in a timely way. And so I think the next piece of this, if this resolution passes, is to ask the city manager for a schedule and an effort estimate on this and the item that Sean mentioned, which was making progress on the objective standards piece.
And just so you know, Jeannie, I asked her to provide me a rough timeline, and she has done so, and I will be forwarding that on to the rest of the city council for both of those items.
So do we need to do an ordinance to make the changes?
Yes, eventually, correct.
One thing on this, I was just wondering if there's a typo on there. It says, on the now therefores be it resolved, it says zone changes. Is that supposed to read zoning changes? Okay, just, that's fine if that word is accurate and wasn't meant to be something different, it's fine. Okay.
Okay, so let's move to item 6, which is Public Employee Medical and Hospital Care Act.
So do we have to vote on that one, or?
Which one?
the
No, we'll-
resolution?
We're going to vote on all of them
Oh, it's-
together
it's
unless
in
there's
the-
a problem.
Okay.
Okay, so we're on item 6, Public Employees Medical and Hospital Care Act. Now, I know there were some questions that went back and forth about this.
And I
So-
did provide the council with all of the questions that I had received and the answers to those questions. I think I caught them all before I turned off my Outlook.
I have a comment on this one.
Yes.
So I appreciate all the feedback that we got. I'm not sure that everyone had an opportunity to really look in detail at all of it. This is a resolution that is identical to the previous resolution. It really does just say the name. On the other hand, for me personally, it is calling out a set of benefits, employee benefits, that we haven't really gotten into and discussed in detail. And again, with regard to kind of fiscal responsibility and transparency, and I think we should come back in a more holistic way and discuss those as a package when the salary survey comes back, and then revisit this initiative. In effect, I feel very uncomfortable voting for Resolved A, which basically says we carry the full cost of these benefits, as they are today and in perpetuity, with, whatever increases come down the line. This is basically affirming that the city picks up all expenses, heretofore. And so, without kind of getting into the whole benefits package and the salary survey, I'd rather delay this. It's not due until November 30th, and so I don't know if any of the other council members
Okay,
would support that line of thinking.
So if I may, I think we got some files from you.
We did. I'm sorry, just a couple of things. This definitely would, the salary survey is going to be a comprehensive look at salary and benefits, so that will definitely be part of that. It is unlikely that work will be completed before this is due.
Okay, so can I finish what I was going
Of
to say?
course.
Okay, so we got these files from you with respect to item number 6.
Yeah, the
And we received it
attachments.
at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I got to say, I have not been able to look at it. So I agree with Councilmember Lebové. I think, we should not vote on this tonight, and we should table this. We should not, and I want everybody to get a chance to read this, because this is really something that could impact the city.
Well, I just have to push the point forward, which was in the staff report, that there is no change whatsoever in the benefits that the employees receive, the payments that the city makes, or the contributions that the employees make. The only reason why this is being required by CalPERS is that recently the CalPERS health insurance system dropped from 5 areas to 3 and renamed the different areas. So in order for the city's resolution to still be valid, it needs to reference that new name. So that is the only thing that this resolution does. And as I said, the council instructed me to move forward with a comprehensive benefits and salary survey, and within the context of that work, all of that will be looked at, and I'll be bringing to you for your review and consideration. My concern about, it is true that it is till November, but I just would encourage the council not to delay this. If for some reason we were to miss the deadline on this, it would mean that the city and its employees would be ineligible for health insurance.
So we still have September and October, and
So when do we expect the salary survey? We requested that at end of June, so.
Well, I only
when do we have-
received my direction at the last meeting, and so I am moving forward with putting together a contract. The timeline for the firm that you chose, I don't have it in front of me, but I think it was 10 to 12 weeks.
This affect, where the salary survey may disclose, all this is saying is whatever your salary and benefits are, you're gonna continue paying them.
Well, it's just referring strictly to the health insurance benefits through
That's what you
CalPERS.
have. And we are already under contract to do that, under the government code or under this contract with PERS.
Correct, and like I said, it's not changing any of our relationship in terms of, what the employees contribute or what the employer contributes or the plans that are available. It is strictly a change due to the changes from 5 to 3 regions and the change in the name. And so CalPERS, in their infinite wisdom, is requiring every single city that contracts with them in the entire state to redo the resolutions. And so as you can see from the prior resolution, it is identical to this one word for word, except for the portion where it doesn't say Bay Area, it says Region 1.
So I guess I should ask Kirsten, under this resolution, are you assuming any additional obligations?
No additional obligations, no.
Second question is, are you able to get out of any obligations that we've already assumed under contracts with PERS?
No.
It sounds like this is just a neutral resolution. You call the rose by any other name, it's still a rose. They just want to call itself a violet or something else. And that's all we're doing here.
I would agree, and I would say that the opportunity, to look at the benefits is that's coming up soon, along with the salary survey.
But that's not going to affect this. The resolution just says you pay whatever benefits you're paying. They're not requiring us to pay anything other than what we're already obligated to pay.
Correct.
Well, what it's doing, and I think what Councilmember LaBouvet has called out is it is saying we are paying the full cost of these benefits and family members and so forth. And that's saying that we are doing it, and that can be seen as a commitment that we are doing and continue to do that. Yes, we are currently doing that, but we may be reviewing that. I see the balancing act here of saying, that's in A there. It sounds like a commitment that this council would be making here August 20th, and then if we come back in a month or 2 or 3 after the salary survey to negotiate a different package, maybe say for new employees we're not going to cover family members. We've just a month or 2 ago said we commit to paying the full benefits for all family members. That seems strange. But
Well,
it is only reiterating what we currently have, and we may be changing it.
And
but-
within the budget that was approved, this was what, we calculated into the budget, was what our current arrangement was from last year. With a 3-point, one of the documents I sent you was the increase, and I think it was it depended on the plan, but there was like a 3 to 6% spread of an increase.
I think the issue in my mind is, can we change that anyway? We're already bound to do that. All we're saying is we were already bound to do that, and we'll continue to be bound to do that. So I don't know how we could change and say we're going to not pay the public employees medical benefit. The way it reads is, under Government Code Section 22-920, we're subject to paying those. I'm.
Well, actually, you're
Am I
not.
misreading something?
We're doing it. Well, so if you kind of read on to some of the other resolutions, there are provisions where you could contribute less than the full amount.
But we're already in contract with them to pay those amounts.
No, this is negotiable. Everything's negotiable, right? You have to specify it here. So basically what you're doing is you're authorizing a warrant on a recurring basis for the full amount.
Yeah, but we're already committed under the contract we have with this. Maybe first
No,
we
it's
Yeah,
not-
so what
it's not-
this resolution is doing, it's reiterating the current situation, and it's merely changing the name of the group. If at the end of the salary survey and the council considers the benefits that are currently offered to its employees, and you want to make changes to that, first you'll need to make changes with the employees. Then you go to PERS and you make any changes that are necessary. So today, all you're doing is reaffirming the current situation and changing the name as directed by PERS.
I mean, I think I'm a little uncomfortable with the transparency aspect of this, especially since we're getting, you know, resident letters about transparency in that, you know, on the agenda, we called this a name change, and then the resolution is named equal amount for employees and annuitants, and then in the body, it actually, you know, talks about full cost. And so, to me, you know, I would like to be more transparent and at least come back and change the way this is kind of portrayed in front of the public and see if somebody wants to talk about it.
So what you're requesting is to pull it from the consent calendar?
Yes.
Yes.
And shall we, do we need to take a vote on this, a separate vote?
Yes, so what you can do is you can make a motion and vote on moving it to the regular agenda if you want to have further discussion about it, and then vote on the remainder of the consent calendar. So pull this off the consent calendar, put it on the regular consent calendar so we can
So do
have
we
it.
need a motion to pull it off the
You do.
consent calendar?
Yes.
Okay, do I have a motion to pull this item number 6 off the consent calendar?
I'll make that motion since I was
I'll second. I'll
complaining.
second.
Andre?
I have a motion by Councilmember Labouvet, a second by Councilmember Alahi to pull item number 6, Public Employees Medical Hospital and Care Act from the consent calendar. So if I could just get a voice vote. So, Councilmember Alahi,
Yes.
Member Labouvet,
Yes.
Member Luthold,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Lawler,
Yes.
and Mayor Turner.
Yes.
Passes 5-0. Thank you.
So let's move to item 7, that's 2019 Neighborhood Street Improvement Project Construction Contract Awards. Any comments from the council?
I do have a comment about this. I mean, given how much it's going to cost us to do all of those streets, have you reached out to Los Gatos and considered piggybacking on their street maintenance and potentially getting a better, you know, economies of scale, basically?
Initially, not this year, but last year, you know, regarding, and this was before the current city engineer came, we did have some discussions with Matt Morley. He's the Parks and Public Works Director, and I did reach out to a couple of other city engineers, some that I know from other places, and in general, they agreed that there's not, I mean, there's some economies of scale, but given the amount of work that we have to do here, it really wouldn't make that much difference, if any. And trying to, hook two projects from, two separate projects from two separate cities together under one contract is really, I don't even know if that's even possible, is it?
It can be done, it's just more complicated in terms of timing and having things sort of align perfectly. It can be more difficult.
But my overall impression was that it wouldn't necessarily save us any additional funds.
Is that worth something looking into for the future?
It is. I mean, in terms of these individual neighborhood projects with the curb and gutter and the street resurfacing, those will, if the council so chooses, will continue into the future. As for the pavement management program, we're actually ratcheting down from the biggest part of that, at least at the moment. So, I'd say it probably is more likely to be possible for these Blanchard-like drives projects and less so for the pavement management program. But yeah, it is something we certainly could look at in the future.
Okay.
I had two questions actually directed at this. Number one, kind of the opposite perhaps, or a piece of this. What are we looking at on the timing of getting these projects done? Are we going to be able to do anything before the rains, or are these really targeting for spending next spring, or is this half and half?
No, these projects are for this season, and they, as far as I know, our city engineer's here. When was the approximate start date? First week of September.
That's for
So
Blanchard? For Palos Verdes?
Well, it's for 3 streets.
Okay.
And so starting at the 1st of September, we don't foresee any issue related to weather. So we should be fine this year.
Okay. And also you're basically choosing the lowest responsible bidder and all. Do you have any information about the difference between the bids that you're choosing here versus the ones that weren't chosen in terms of the difference of the price and the performance on those?
Actually, do you want to speak to that for us? Yeah, this is Jessica Connor, city engineer.
Good evening. So we received 4 bids for this project. This was the lowest responsible bidder. The other 3 were several $100,000 more for this project.
Is Palos Verdes, is the amount just, is the scope of the work different than the other ones, or is it just because of the area?
Yeah, it's just a longer street.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah,
No?
I just had a question on potholes. I mean, you're fixing the entire streets, but there seems to be potholes in different streets. Is there any program to get those fixed also?
You mean streets other than the 3 listed
Yes,
here?
yes.
Not for this
Just-
season, no.
Yeah, just generally, I mean, those potholes are gonna get bigger and bigger. Maybe you should look at, because I don't know how much it's gonna cost to just fix a couple of potholes and move on.
We definitely have a street list, and we keep up with issues on each street. For this, not included with this particular project, no potholes aren't included, but that is something that we keep a list on.
And the city does have the ability to do emergency repairs if necessary. We have a after-hours and weekend contract with Los Gatos. We have a firm that we use to do that, during the weekday. And then we didn't use them this year, but last year with the contractor who did the annual pavement management program, we were able to identify some potholes in different spaces, and they were able to assist us by adding that onto their contract. So it's entirely possible that with the next year's pavement management program, if there are some that are identified, that we could add those in at that time as an extra cost.
So just to clarify, so we're looking at a September 1st start for Palos Verdes, give or take, and then what about Via Vaquero and Equestrian? What's the time?
So it's up to the contractor to make their schedule. I can't make the schedule till you guys approve which streets we're doing. I would assume they're not going to do all the streets at one time. I would assume that would start 4 to 5 weeks afterwards. Palos Verdes taking the longest of the 3.
But again, getting it all done by Christmas.
Oh, definitely. I would think more the end of October.
Thank you.
Okay. And I just wanted to let you know that I have received some positive feedback on the work
Terrific.
that you're doing.
Great.
Okay.
I think this, so if we just kind of look at value added to the community, this was the biggest decision that we made in the last budget cycle, right? Was to spend this $500,000 on this pavement improvement. So I hope, I know it was mentioned in the city newsletter about the previous work that we've done, and I hope the community receives these improvements in a good way.
Yes,
Appreciate it.
thank you. Okay, so do I have a motion then to accept 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7?
So moved.
Good, okay, so I have a second by Mayor Pro Tem Lawler, and I missed the second.
I put the second in, I think.
Okay. Not the voting buttons.
Nope.
Nope.
So Councilmember Lahi,
Yes.
Councilmember Labouvet,
Yes.
Councilmember Lutho,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Lawler,
Yes.
and Mayor Turner.
Yes. So we'll now move to public hearings.
That's his 5-0.
Okay, if there are any members of the public that would like to speak, please turn in your speaker cards. No one? Okay, so let me move to staff presentation.
Yes. So tonight, we have Terry Madsen, who's a principal consultant at ClearSource Financial Consulting. He is here to, I asked him to come specifically because 4 of the 5 of you were not here when we did the user and regulatory fee study last year, which is where we worked on trying to set the fees at a level that was more in line with full cost recovery or closer to cost recovery. And so Terry is here tonight to kind of get everyone a little bit up to speed on, that effort. And as part of the resolution that was passed by the prior council, it did include a annual return. It should have been earlier in the year, before the end of the fiscal year. I mean, it doesn't really matter when it happens, but if we'd have done it to match up with the expiration of the first year fees, it would have been sooner. But the idea was the council included in the resolution of adopting the newly updated fees to consider a increase based on the cost of living annually. And so Terry's going to give a bit of background and talk a little bit about what we have for you tonight.
Well, Mayor and members of the council, thank you for allowing me to speak with you this evening. As the city manager mentioned, we assisted the city with this process last year. And as a sort of refresher to newer council members and to prior council members, because this is a topic you typically maybe only see once a year, I'm here from ClearSource Financial Consulting. Our firm helps communities throughout the state identify and recover the costs of providing specific services. This evening, we're discussing what are commonly referred to as user and regulatory fee services. These are fees that are collected by the city for services that are benefiting a specific resident or applicant rather than services that provide community-wide benefit. So one of the council members was referencing pothole repair. Pothole repair is something that we typically think of as tax-funded. It's providing this community-wide benefit. When we recover costs from that are providing a specific benefit to an applicant, we free up general fund revenues to provide services that have a more general, broad community-wide benefit. So that is why communities throughout the state are proactively managing user and regulatory fees to identify a specific revenue source for services that provide a specific benefit. As a clarifying item, we are not examining taxes. These are not taxes, these are fees. We're not examining taxes, we are not examining utility rates, and we are not examining a certain category of fees that are commonly called impact fees or mitigation fees. Those are fees that are collected to offset like infrastructure impacts of development. The things we're looking at this evening are typically the driver of them is some service provided. So it's either in-house city labor or professional services labor that the city contracts for. Would you move to the next slide? So the city last year completed a comprehensive user and regulatory fee study, the underlying cost of service analysis that can be used to support adopted fees. It's a significant study and one that is not required to be performed annually. We typically see communities perform these every 3 to 5 years, or if you have like some significant organizational shifting where you believe, hey, we've restructured our units, we've restructured the way we do business, and so we think our costs may have changed. But if your organization looks generally similar, your cost structures are generally similar, then we recommend doing those comprehensive studies periodically because they do require a significant amount of staff input, city resource dedication, those kind of things. But in order to avoid like long-term stagnation of fees, what we also recommend is that communities institute a periodic annual adjustment that ties to some form of cost inflation that the city is likely to experience. So because these are service-based fees, frequently in today's environment, public sector costs are increasing to meet PERS obligations or just cost inflation amongst labor dollars or professional contract services, predetermined inflation factors. So although it may not be a perfect mirror, cities commonly use the consumer price index, the annual change in consumer price index for a region that they lie within. You lie within the San Francisco, Oakland, Hayward region. And so we recommended using that region as an annual inflator. We've received positive feedback from the development community regarding that annual inflation adjustment. The feedback we received is that rather than having fees stay stale for, let's say, 10 years and then go up by 50%, they'd rather count on a periodic adjustment of 3 to 4%, 2 to 3%, whatever that CPI type adjustment is, and know it's a uniform pattern rather than flat followed by significant adjustment or spike. Because you completed a full comprehensive study last year, this year represents that interim type CPI adjustment. The regional CPI change for last year was 3.87%. So when fees are proposed for adjustment in this schedule, that adjustment does not exceed 3.87%. One of the council members had asked if any fees are proposed to increase by more than CPI, and the answer is no. The maximum change is 3.87, but there are several fees that are proposed to remain unchanged. I went through this briefly, but the reason communities are proactively managing fee-related revenue is because we want to make sure that receivers of service are paying for those services if they're receiving a specific service above and beyond that community-wide expectation of what we receive from our sales tax dollars, or in Monte Sereno's case, our property tax dollars. We typically think of property taxes as being used to fund public safety services, public works services, parks and recreation services. But there is this common understanding that because development-related services provide a very specific benefit to an applicant, that we would recover the majority of costs of providing those services. Also, we do annually update them to just keep up with those likely changes in costs from year to year. And then finally, annual review provides staff with an opportunity to identify maybe some minor refinements that need to take place. So you say, I did a comprehensive study a year ago. I don't want to go through a full comprehensive study again, but I do know that we have a new electric vehicle charging station in place and we want to adopt a rate for hourly charging or something like that. It offers you an opportunity to adjust and include new fees in the schedule, but they must be adopted by the city council. And so over and over we use phrases like cost recovery and cost of service. Because these are fees, we have a legal mandate that in order to stay fees, the amounts we collect should not exceed the city's cost of providing service. That's what the comprehensive study examined, and what we found is that your existing fees, in the prior years did not exceed your cost of service, and your proposed fees tonight do not exceed your cost of service. So they're still within that legal boundary. But what's important for you to consider as a council is the concept of cost recovery. So if we identify a service as costing the city $400, let's say a building permit inspection costs the city $400 to perform because of either staff costs or professional services costs, that is the cost to the city. If we choose to recover $200 of that cost from fees, we would say we have 50% cost recovery from fees, but the city still incurred a $400 cost. The remaining $200 is subsidized by other members of the community via property tax dollars. And so that's the question before a council when it decides what fee level to adopt is what portion of these costs, if I'm a resident and I want to add square footage to my home, and the building code requires that in order to add square footage, I receive permitting and plan check services, and those cost the city. Should I, as the adder of square footage to my home, pay for those costs directly, or should I pay for a portion of those costs and other residents of Monte Sereno pay for a portion of those costs? In Monte Sereno's case, you've adopted full cost recovery for those building fees, but you still target less than cost recovery in certain areas like encouraging an applicant's ability or a non-applicant's ability to appeal certain decisions of the community. Or to encourage compliance with tree regulations, you deliberately set tree permit fees at less than full cost recovery. So just one more time, broad overview, the purpose of this is to increase your fees, the majority of them by CPI, 3.87%. None of the fees in this schedule are proposed to increase by more than that, but there are several fees that will remain unchanged unless you tell us differently based on prior council direction. These are appeal fees. Appeals are very significant undertakings by a city. They involve city attorney time, significant staff time, really magnitudinal effort, 20+ hours, thousands of dollars of effort, but the city has chosen to recover $360 of that, and that was a deliberate policy choice made by the prior council. Another deliberate policy choice was this significant tree removal review. Again, a fairly intensive undertaking to decide whether it's appropriate to remove these trees or not, but the fee is $100. Use permit review for animals, if we want chicken coops in our backyard or horse keeping or something like that that we need to review and make sure that we're not being a nuisance to our neighbors or in compliance with zoning code. These are things that are set at less than full cost recovery in order to encourage people from going out and trying to do things on Saturday or do things and hoping they won't get caught doing them. Next slide, please. There are also fees in your schedule that are proposed to remain unchanged because they are based on something else. So they're driven by something other than just a service time. They may be correlated to another index, fees that are based on project valuation, fees that are calculated as a % of another fee, fees that are in your schedule but that Monte Sereno doesn't establish. They're established by the state and we're just reflecting them in the fee schedule, certain hourly rates, and then again, taxes and impact fees we're leaving unchanged. The intent of these types of interim adjustments is really just to reflect that gradual increase in costs that we experience as communities due to inflationary pressures, increases in service and supplies costs, increases in technology costs, labor costs, those kind of things. But in Monte Sereno, that 3.87% change, assuming typical development patterns, it wouldn't result in magnitudinal new revenue. You're a small community that's primarily residential. Based on your historical development, it would be roughly $25,000 in additional revenue. What we say is it's critical to realize that that's revenue to offset the costs of existing service levels. It's not assuming new services will be funded with that revenue. It's just an offset to existing costs. In your 1920 budget, you do anticipate more significant revenue increases than that, but that is predicated on a new development happening. And so it's the new revenue is assuming that there's more development than typical happening in this fiscal year. It's not being driven by this fee change. This fee change is driving roughly $25,000 in revenue. Next slide. So one of the final items I'd like to point out is that these fees are set at the discretion of the city council and the direction of the city council, as long as we comply with the tenants that they are correlated to our service costs and that we don't exceed our cost of providing services. In your prior council resolution, there's this reference to the CPI adjustment, sort of giving us direction of where we want to go to proactively manage these, but there's also very clear direction that even when these fees are adjusted, prior to actually being formally adjusted, the council will be asked to review the proposed adjustments. That's what's happening this evening, and that's what will continue to happen from year to year. So the city manager will know council has directed a certain pattern. I'm going to go back to council and say, this is the pattern you directed. Do you choose to adopt or modify that pattern? Thank you. I'm available to answer any questions or receive any feedback you have.
Okay, so let me ask the council for questions, but before that, I want to ask the audience here, if you need to talk in this section, you can still submit your blue cards. So, council?
I have a couple questions regarding your original study. So when you did the effort estimates of the original study, do you remember if you included contractor resource and contractor fees? So for example, a lot of times we contract out building inspections and plan reviews and so forth. Was that used as part of the effort estimates?
Yes.
In the overall? So the contracting fees were in there?
Yes.
Is there some reason why in the previous methodology, you really were using kind of loaded labor rates times percent of related resource loading to come up with what the fee-related recoveries would be? Is there any reason why we couldn't do that now? Like, why are you recommending CPI versus, you know, we know what the cost of employee expenses increase is, and there should be a capacity estimate for, you know, what the percent of loading of these sorts of projects are. Why can't we do that simple calculation rather than use a very generic CPI type mechanism?
You could use that calculation. I will tell you it was not simple, though. I would argue that it is not a simple calculation. We did multiple interviews with city staff, and so if you're doing a comprehensive study, you're curious about labor costs, you're curious about service supplies costs, professional service agreements, but you're also curious about what does their year-to-year activities look like and their daily activities, and where are they spending their resources. That was a significant undertaking by staff. We don't feel like you get a lot of bang for your buck by undertaking basically assuming thousands more in costs for less than that in receipts and thousands in staff time and professional services costs to answer questions we would have in order to specifically answer your concerns. And so that's why we do a periodic refinement, and then every 3 years we recalibrate to get whole again. But you could do what you're asking.
So let's say we simplify and say, let's take the resource loading assumptions from the previous study and just multiply it by the percent increase in personnel cost. Is that, are you able to do that?
Yeah, you could do that.
Rather than CPI, because when I think of CPI, I think of gallon of milk, basket of eggs, you know, cost of rent. It's just so unrelated when we have the data sitting right in front of us. Why are we not being a little more data-driven about this?
You could absolutely do that if you wish as a council. I will say that typically what you will find is that your costs are going up by even more than 3.87%. And so a lot of times councils know I understand that we're in an environment of cost inflation in this moment, but I want to stand firm to this idea of a periodic adjustment. It's not unlikely in a community, I don't know Monte Sereno's 1920 budget, but it would not be unlikely for me to say, public safety costs are going up 9%. Do you want to, if you adopted a schedule of fees last year that were the first fee updates in over a decade, and they were significant changes, and then we come back this year and say your labor costs have gone up 9% or 30%, would you actually, that's something to consider in terms of bang for your buck, would you actually want to move that direction, or would you say, thank you for telling me that information, I still feel more comfortable tracking a regional cost index rather than the known outcome? That's the challenges we face with communities, is how much are we willing, because we deliberately subsidize certain things. So Monte Sereno has been a community that errs on the side of conservative with regard to fee collection historically. But we can do what you're asking.
So I had asked for an estimate, since we finished last year already, and we just approved an unaudited version of the financial year. What is our recovery for this year, right? Or for the previous fiscal year. And I'm struggling, maybe, I don't know if this question's for Terry or for you, if you guys work together on this, but you had provided the council a piece of data called unaudited revenue projection for FY 18 and 19 at basically $550,000. Yet in the warrant list that we just approved, the total license permit fees were more like $733K or $733,000. So what's, I don't.
These are specific categories of fees, so not every license and permit is included in this study. We go and look for, particularly for building permits. Again, we're not looking at construction taxes, which may be included in the license and permits section. So we look at building.
Tax wouldn't be part of the fee structure, right? I mean, so.
No, absolutely not.
Maybe that's something that we need to come back with, like if you can identify which of
I can
the
identify it for you right now. In your 1920 adopted budget, you have several lines under general fund revenues.
Yes.
They're called building permits,
It's the category called license and permits.
but then there's a breakdown of that category, license and permits. It gets broken down into further detail in terms of what makes up licenses and permits.
Yes, okay.
Building permits, subdivision fees, encroachment fees, imaging fees.
Okay, which of those are not appropriate fees?
Those are in the 551.
Only exclusively?
Primarily, those are the drivers.
So the only one that's not in there is like the construction tax that you mentioned?
You got it. Business license is not in there. The ones I referenced.
Okay.
This should equal 551. Imaging fee comes from a different section. I think it's a miscellaneous revenue.
So, but construction permits, grading permits, subdivision fee,
You got it.
zoning fees, encroachments, community planning fees, road impact fees, those are.
Not road impact fees.
Not that one, okay.
And so we had projected those revenues based on our last year's study, pre-1819. Those revenues used to equal 433,000. When you sum those line items, it would be roughly 430,000. We predicted after our study that those revenues would turn into roughly 595,000. The unaudited 1819 amount is roughly 550,000, so over 90% correlation. So we feel good about our estimates. Your 1920 budget projects 740,000, but again, that budget is based on an assumption that Montalvo Oaks will pull building permits and require significant plan check.
I guess my fast math, I'm still seeing like 600K, and you guys were saying something like 551.
Yeah, it's 551.
Or-
And maybe the revenues have gotten even better since the document I looked at. I may have looked at a preliminary budget. But the bottom line is if you're seeing 600K, that would make me even happier because that would be basically 100% correlation.
So you prepared these increases, or you're just consulting on? I know you're consulting on this, but, so you do see, if you looked at the same budget in our personnel section, that, that's pretty quantified also. Why not just look at those percentage increases on our personnel category and use that percentage rather than CPI?
So we prepared this update back in April before we build it based on a prior CPI before your adopted budget comes typically close to June 30th. And even then, we would not be able to specifically just say personnel costs have increased by, according to that budget, 22%. We'd have to know what personnel is in that 22% increase. Did we hire a new body, or did we give a significant pay raise? There are several things to consider of why is this difference happening? What type of, is it overhead? And that modifies your rate significantly, whether it's overhead or direct service provider. So again, I just want to caution the idea that it's an easy calculation.
But that's knowable data, right? It's knowable. Can you at least admit that? That's knowable data.
It is knowable data. The 1920 adopted budget is knowable data, but it is a
Right,
true
so-
study.
And so are those other personnel details. So that's very knowable also, especially since we only have kind of one planner, one, that's knowable data.
Knowable data.
More than abstracting it to some generalized CPI type, and,
Yep.
so I think that's the resistance that I have, is that it's a very abstract concept of CPI versus having very knowable data and doing it very data-driven way, so.
The question is going to be cost, even if it's knowable data. Are you going to have a professional consultant calculate knowable data so that we can vote on it and rely on it? Or are you going to do what most cities do, which says CPI is something that is fine to rely on? Do we want to go back and do a mini study of, I mean, it's not you looking at the budget, it is a professional outside service looking at the budget so that we then have a reliable study. We'd be paying X for that study so that we would capture a more correct number, which what we're hearing is probably a lot more than the CPI. Now, is that what we want to do as a council, capture larger user fees? We didn't get any letters saying we're not collecting enough money. You got letters that were upset that there's any increase at all, when we know our costs are increasing 9 to 20%, and the proposal is 3%. Or the alternative, leave it at 0, it sounds like. So
Are we able to actually say that our cost is going 9 to 20%? Are we able to prove that?
I don't think so,
I
because.
don't think so.
I mean, because I think that, even the piece of data that Terry said is that for fiscal year 18-19, we're at 92% capture rate already, right? So that basically we're working with an 8% margin.
no, because now we're looking at an increase of the cost of the planner, the cost of related health insurance, the cost of related PERS. And it's not just the planner, it's the building and the computer systems and the cost of electricity. I mean, if we were capturing everything going into the
Yeah, I mean,
study.
to me, I think that the capacity planning is a bigger swing factor, which cannot be done with an average, right? You have to actually do that work. And so,
Right.
yeah, short of doing some capacity planning and then multiplying it by, what raises were allocated in the last cycle, which, again, it's very knowable data. You voted in a 5% step increase. And so we know what that piece is. and
So
there-
are we
and then
going
there's
to,
some
right, but we need something we can rely on. Are we going to go with 5%, if that's what that is? Again, higher than CPI,
So why does it have to be a fixed number? Why can't it be a calculated number? based on
because
the
you'd
situation?
have to get a professional outside that you could rely on as using your best practices. You can't just have staff calculate a number. You'd have to have an outside person you can rely on. We're talking about raising $25,000. It would cost what? What did the first study cost?
So the first study cost $30,000. This update cost, I think, $1,500, $1,500 or $1,800, I can't remember. A rough number of what you're proposing from our firm would be closer to 20. So you'd have, if you elected to leave fees at 3.87%, we wouldn't even recommend you hire us because you'd end up with a 3,000 net gain from that action. And it would have cost the city more because we will use thousands of dollars of staff resource on top of our own resource.
So I think this is the discussion for council to have if we've got the answers to the questions as to whether we have enough information to vote or need more citizen input or these things.
So, go ahead, yes.
Just, do you happen to know how much we're subsidizing from the general fund?
Based on the study last year, we saw, I'm doing quick math.
I think
It was 180,000 in remaining subsidies. So you were subsidizing in the neighborhood of 250,000 and we lowered that, or 350,000 and we lowered that to 180,000. I'm doing quick math. I can get out a calculator if we want, but 780. We identified costs last year of 780,000 in what we felt like were truly eligible for fee-related recovery. And you had historically been collecting 430,000, and we proposed moving it to closer to 600,000. So that left 180,000 in continued under recovery.
The-
Go ahead.
Yeah, and I guess your projections are based on developments as they are going on. With the new project at Hacienda, would we be subsidizing more than the $180,000? Or do you have any estimate how much more that would be?
I think my belief, if the Hacienda project is at the building permit stage, so your level of subsidy depends on what stage they are in the process. You subsidize more on the planning side, so that early stage that takes very significant staff effort and a lot of like pre-education. Once you get to the building permit stage, we really do target full cost recovery. So if they are at that stage, I would not, and that's the way I read the 1920 budget, I would say you are not increasing your subsidy.
And that is correct. They have all their planning entitlements, so they're just moving to the building permit stage. And Terry, just to reiterate, your firm recommended that we do another full study on the third year, correct?
Every 3 to 5 years. So I have communities that are more aggressive than that, and they do it they do a cycle of every 2 years, CPI in the interim year. I have communities that wait 5 years. We say typically every 3 to 5 years feels like, again, that concept of bang for your buck. What kind of return are you getting for consultant and staff expenditure?
So this would represent our second year in a cycle.
So we're not due for another study until next year?
It could be as early as next year.
You could direct a study this fiscal year, but the answers wouldn't be ready typically until fiscal year 2021 because they take 60 days to go into effect once you do decide to modify development-related fees.
So I have a question for you on the CPI and how you calculate it. You use the San Francisco, Oakland, Hayward model. Why not this area for your CPI?
There is no regional index for the Monte Sereno, Los Gatos area. We use the closest available region. There's only, I think, 5 to 6 regional indexes. Los Angeles, Long Beach, Anaheim, San Francisco, Oakland, Hayward. So we picked the closest region. And we do feel like you correlate to that region. There's a reasonable correlation. If we didn't feel like there was a reasonable correlation to the region, we would try and find some different type of index.
I mean, would you say we are higher generally as far as the cost of living is concerned? in
Well,
this area compared to
I
Oakland
saw a
and Hayward?
statistic that said City of Campbell has the highest home prices in the nation or something. So I think you are in line with the region.
I don't think so.
It can't be Campbell.
No, Los Altos Hills maybe. It might have been Los Altos Hills.
That could be the one.
But in this area, we saw some RE/MAX study, top 20 in the nation. Let's say 10 of them are within a 60-mile radius of here, right?
Correct.
So we do think that the public sector, for many years, costs were very stagnant, and now there's this catch-up mode happening. And so we really try to err on the side of conservative because you do have that legal mandate of we don't want to over-recover. So we want to err on the side of conservative. We believe the consumer price index represents a conservative approach.
So basically by using CPI, we're actually keeping the increase to a minimum for the citizens.
That's what we believe, and we believe that when you do go back and do the study 3 years from now, let's say, if you left fees unchanged, the answers are going to say, to get to full cost recovery, we would recommend you increase building fees by 15%. 3 years from now, if you do this pattern, our hope is the answer will be, to get to full cost recovery, you increase fees by another 3%. That is just what we have seen historically. It's an editorial comment. But we know if we work with communities in the Central Valley that they just have challenging economic circumstances in certain valley communities, and so they decide to leave water and sewer rates unchanged for 20 years. And they believe they are benefiting the community because the community can't bear that change in water and sewer rates. But when they do finally have to adjust their water and sewer rates, it is a 100% overnight rate adjustment because we didn't proactively manage that for 20 years. So water and sewer, different animal, but what I'm saying is patterns we have seen are that your costs will continue to increase if you operate like most cities in California. Your costs will continue to increase. And so if we wait 3 years from now, the answer will likely look like, to get to cost recovery, you have to increase fees by more than if you had just periodically increased them from year to year. That is a logical conclusion.
So are there any other questions? None? So I do have a question about the resolution.
Yes?
You said that city council gets to decide the various increases in fees, but this resolution says the city council desires that annually the city manager may increase fees based on the annual percentage.
The very next paragraph says, whereas prior to adopting those adjustments, the city council shall have the opportunity to review and consider those adjustments. So it's providing the city manager direction of where you want to go, but you as the council have the true authority to adopt changes in fees, and they shouldn't be adopted without your review prior to adopting.
I would like to propose different wording for
Okay,
that,
sure.
to actually give the city council the full authority to change fees, and then we direct the city manager to act in those.
Do you have preferred language?
Yeah, so we say the city council
Yes.
will decide to increase various fees.
Okay.
And the city council will direct the city manager to increase those fees, rather than giving the city manager the ability to increase fees first.
So what if in that paragraph we said, whereas the city council may direct the city manager to increase fees? Just use the word may direct the city manager, phrase may direct the city manager?
What about if we change the where, because we're talking first about the whereas paragraph here. The city council desires that annually the city manager may propose increases to fees based on. Because, yes, we do pick up that we review and we adopt down below. Just make it a proposed language up above. I think
May
that softens it
propose
the way we need it.
increases to various fees. Yep. Thank you. City Attorney, can we do that?
That's
Okay,
fine. And
so-
the remainder of if you look at the actual findings that you're making, that doesn't speak to the city manager. So you're just clarifying it in the recitals, that's fine.
Proposal, you're right. And then we'll review and we'll adopt.
And the council is the body that does make those final decisions.
I think we also have to modify section 3 then, because section 3 is an automatic trigger.
So what it says that it may be updated on the prior year annual change in the CPI, if, it's just talking about the CPI, if you're going to use the CPI, but if you're going to do something different, this resolution would be different. So this is based on an assumption that you will be doing the CPI.
I have a question about section 4, where it says that it repeals all other fees done by previous councils. And I don't know what the previous council resolutions are.
So the intent.
I feel a little bit uncomfortable about putting that in here as a blanket statement that says, yes, we'll repeal resolutions that previous councils have made without me knowing what it is.
The intent of that is just to say that we are superseding the existing fees, but if you've entered into a commitment to pay fees, if you've already received fee estimates, you're still obligated to pay whatever permit fees you've been quoted, but the idea is that the new fees supersede the old fees. But again, if they are not referenced in here, they are not the subject of this discussion. This discussion is limited specifically to fees that are in this schedule, and even more specifically, only to the user and regulatory fees in this schedule that you have the power to change via this action. They are not looking at the construction tax in the schedule, or your impact fees that appear in this schedule, or fees that are set by the state in this schedule. So very limited action being taken this evening.
So we're not superseding some unknown fee, we're only superseding the ones in Schedule A that are being replaced by the new column in Schedule A.
That's right.
Schedule A.
Yes, and now we'll need to look at that
Yes.
when we have our discussion. I also have some proposals about how we may change some
Yes.
items in there.
Okay.
So you had mentioned previously that there was a previous resolution to this that sort of guided down this path. Is that true? We didn't have the benefit of that, seeing that resolution.
Yes, it was a resolution, I think it was passed last May 1st of 2018. It actually reads very similar to the resolution you're being asked to consider this evening. So if you don't have it, you can feel fairly confident that the wording is almost mirroring it. We use that as the starting point for this resolution. Again, we use the resolutions as direction from prior council, but we come to you as the existing council and re-ask your permission to take actions. And that's why we use the word may, and that's why we use the word before doing anything, we will go to the acting city council, remind them of what prior city council directed, and see if they're in line with that direction.
So there's a previous resolution that already adopts CPI, and this is just a review of that?
Correct.
Well, it just recommended that it be adjusted annually.
Yeah, it recommended that it be adjusted annually by the change in the consumer price index. This is the come back to you to say that staff heard you in the prior resolution and is coming back to you annually with a proposed change to your fee schedule, but it's still up to you to decide whether to adopt those proposed changes or not.
I personally would like to see that other resolution.
So it's on the, if access to the website, it's on there. I'm looking at it right now. It is almost identical. It refers to the same annually on July 1st, various fees and the fee schedule may be updated.
Is that the resolution 69.4.20 or something?
3682.
3680?
Yeah, that's referenced in the whereases.
Well, so
okay.
it's Resolution 3682, I believe.
That sounds right.
It was adopted on May 1st, 2018. They adopted an updated schedule of user and regulatory fees. So that resolution is almost identical to the resolution that's before you tonight.
I should also note that in this resolution, it's really clear. The remaining fees that have not been modified from prior resolutions remain in full force and effect. So we're not changing, it's not like we're abrogating everything else by adopting this resolution.
May I ask another question, please?
Yes.
Your fourth whereas the city intends to periodically no, yes. Can you tell me what that means?
That in that comprehensive study, one of the outcomes of the study, that the city had never done a comprehensive study that staff is aware of. Last year was the first one that was completed. And as part of that study, one of the recommendations was, hey, let's not wait 20 years to do this again. Let's proactively manage this revenue source, even if it means coming to council annually and deciding you don't want to change these fees, but it's still an examination of the revenue source and determining what you want to do with it. And so that whereas is saying that in the report, in that fee study report and in the staff report, there was direction that periodically these costs should be re-examined and fees should potentially be updated as a matter of best practice so that you can confirm what your cost recovery levels are, that you're not over-recovering, how much you're under-recovering, those kind of things.
Okay, can you go to the whereas above, please? Where it
Yes.
says, the city council hereby finds the comprehensive user and regulatory fee study
Yep.
and supporting documentation.
So that's, yes, that study was what the council reviewed last year in May 2018. That study provides the backbone support for your fees, justification that your fees are really fees and they do not exceed the city's cost of providing service. We rely on that study when we say it's appropriate to adjust these fees by CPI. It's not an arbitrary CPI adjustment for the next 100 years. It's in a recent past, we examined our costs. Those costs informed fees in place, and because of those costs, we believe that the proposed fees do not exceed the city's cost of performing services. So it's a support statement of what you're basing your decision to adopt fees on. So that's the May 2018 study.
May 2018?
May 1st, 2018. And that study included an appendix with a cost of service analysis, cost recovery overview, all the supporting documentation.
Okay, I gotta say, I haven't seen it, so,
That was done last term.
yes.
You were on the
I
council.
don't remember it.
Hopefully they showed it to you.
Yes,
We were-
it was during your time on the council.
Yes, but I don't remember it. So,
All right.
anything else? No more questions? So let me now go to
You got
the public, we will now open the public portion of this hearing, with Philippa Alves.
Good evening,
good evening.
council members. You have, I know, some of you received letters of protest about this from the citizens. I would like to know who initiated this item. You got letters in protest because a few people did read it on the council agenda. And you know very well that the majority of citizens in Monte Sereno have not read the council agenda. It sounds slick, but the bottom line is that it's an additional increase in cost to the citizens of Monte Sereno. And I don't know why Monte Sereno keeps being pointed out as a rich man's stronghold. There's a lot of us who aren't rich men who live here and have lived here for many, many years. There has been no citizen input on this, and as far as I know, it just dropped onto the agenda without much fanfare. There hasn't been any effort to make citizens aware of this pending action. And I feel that in order to really be transparent, any kind of action of this variety or this kind or this size should have direct citizen input and an opportunity for citizens to come and hear what this is all about. You people have had a chance to listen to this gentleman who's representing some company, and I'm sure has a very good reason for being here, because if he's working for the company, he's going to benefit by us involving ourselves with this. So he's not exactly a person who is not interested or involved. I know that transparency has been a real problem on the last council, and I would urge you, since the speaker has constantly referred and emphasized revenue as part of this, that you do not take any action tonight, but alert your citizens by direct mail or direct contact that this is in the offing, and give people an opportunity to have meetings with representatives to hear what's going on. This company rep is here to make it look good, and he does a good job, but the citizens really are the ones who are going to bear the brunt of this. Monte Sereno keeps being mentioned as can afford city or town, and their opportunity to sock it to us where charges are concerned. My request, and also the interest of the people who have written to you, who were alerted by one of our neighbors, would appreciate you having opportunity to alert the citizens before you take action. Thank you.
Thank you. So is there anyone else in the public that wishes to speak? Brian McIntyre.
I thought that was a good presentation, and it educated everyone as to the history of where we were, how we got there, and what's ahead. There is one fundamental point that was stated, that permits provide, well, I'll make the statement, permits provide broader benefits than to the applicant themselves. And what I mean by that is, having been involved in construction for several years, I've spoken with a number of people that gratuitously came to me and talked to me about their projects and what they're doing, and asked me to take a look at what they're doing. And many people would do things without a permit. And it is what it is. But when you look at the unpermitted work, there's a cost to that, to each member of the community. For example, if someone is changing, doing some type of a renovation, they're not getting a permit to do that, it may not be done to code. And if it's not done to code, it could create a fire hazard. So who bears the cost of the fire? My insurance will go up, so that's partially on me. So the fact that they're not complying with the permits and not getting them then creates a problem for the community. So although I believe there should be a reasonable recovery, it shouldn't be 100% recovery, I don't think, because it's a benefit to me who's not applying for the permit. And one of the things, Councilmember LeBeauvet, you mentioned data, and you like to see data. One of the things that you may want to consider, not tonight but in the future, is finding out how much unpermitted work is being done in Monte Sereno. because that's a real cost and those are real hard numbers. The problem is getting that data, because the only time that data is going to be visible is in a disclosure statement when I'm selling my property and I have to make a full disclosure as to what I'm doing, what I'm selling, and have I disclosed all the unpermitted work, et cetera. So those documents aren't seen very broadly. But it's real and it's there. And I know that people have showed me what they're doing, and they've said, I'm not doing this with a permit. So, and then as a CPA by trade, there's a little expression and it goes something like this. It's better to be approximately correct than precisely wrong. So, you know, when you're taking the CPA or the CPI adjustment of 3.97, you know, pick a number, like, do you want to say it's 4? Do you want to say it's 2? Like, you know, I don't think you have to be super precise on that, but you do have, thank you.
Are there anybody else from the public that wishes to speak? No? So if there are no more speakers, let me take it back to council. I wanted to go back here to see if anybody had a question. Is this where we had the charging unit?
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry, that was the one we did add in this year. In order for us to be able to charge for the use of the new EV charger, we do have to set a fee. And do you want to just speak briefly to that, how we ended up setting it?
So the rate proposed before you this evening is $1 per hour. We consulted with another agency that was undergoing a similar endeavor of installing new city electrical vehicle charging stations at City Hall that would be available to the public. And they used a large electric vehicle charging consultant who provides services similar to ours, but specific about electrical vehicle charging station, let's say. And what their answer was that there are 3 primary ways that communities charge for electric vehicle charging access. But the motivators, the underlying drivers of why we charge are, 1, to recover the base costs of our electricity, but the other is to encourage efficient use of the station. So what the communities start to worry about is, I don't want to specifically limit my amount to nothing but the cost per kilowatt hour, which is extremely low. I want to make sure that there's an incentive to move your car once it's fully charged so that the next person in line can go, instead of saying it's 15 cents an hour and it stops calibrating after my car is fully charged and now I sit there. So there is, occasionally communities have this per kilowatt hour charge plus a $1 per hour, $6 per hour once you're notified that you're fully charged and you continue to leave your car there. What Monte Sereno is proposing is just a $1 per hour rate, and staff did a general regional comparison, and that was in line with what other communities in the region are doing. I was in Los Gatos before this, and their charging station is $1 to access, the $1 base access charge, and then $1 per hour after that, per kilowatt hour after that. So you're in line with that. Slightly lower because this doesn't propose a $1 base access charge.
So there was a $200 charge last month for the charging station. Is that something that we will incur every month?
It's an annual fee for the license too.
So it's an annual fee?
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions?
I think,
Do we know how often it's been used since it's been implemented? We don't have any information on, like, how long it would take to recoup the cost of paying the electric on that?
I mean, I only, just from looking out the window, there was actually a vehicle out there this morning, but the company that we use can provide us all those metrics, correct? Yeah, I mean, we can get that data. And what will happen is, between now and when we set the rate, I think we'll be able to get more information so that when we come back to request a fee adjustment next year, we'll have more information to be able to say, well, this seemed like it worked well, or it didn't work well, and we recommend something else.
May I make one more clarifying statement for the council, just based on the public comment received, in case it's helpful to you in your decision-making process? The items we're examining this evening, because they're fee in nature and not taxes, they specifically apply only when some action is taken or some service is requested. So I decide I want to perform business within city limits. I need to request a business license. Or I decide I want to add onto my house. I need to receive building inspections. There will be no additional fees if I do not develop my property, if I do not modify my home. There is absolutely zero impact to your citizens unless some form of development action or grading permit or something is being requested.
It's actually the opposite, because there's an impact to the citizens if they're subsidizing the development that's not being recovered.
There you go.
Okay, are there any other questions?
Yeah, with regard to the $1 an hour, I just did quick calculation of, so it looks like it's about a 7.7 kilowatt charger. And if I look at PG&E rates, they vary from 11, almost 12 cents a kilowatt hour to 50 cents a kilowatt hour. I just wonder if $1 an hour is too cheap. It's very much on the low end. If a tier 3 rate is typically around 29 cents or 30 cents an hour per kilowatt hour, that would make it a little north of $2 an hour. So if you put a $2 an hour fee, it didn't look like the pricing that we had from allows us to do fixed cost plus per kilowatt hour. Yeah, I think you had to choose either fixed fee or kilowatt hour, or.
That's correct.
So if you're just going to go kilowatt hour and you also want to try to recover some of the overhead costs, I think you have to be a little north of $1 per hour.
But it looks like, the idea was we didn't want to do that. We want to promote the use of electric vehicles, provide a station in this area, and actually subsidize that, as opposed to recovering everything. If we are recovering everything, then there's no benefit to having put the charger in. People can charge at home rather than choosing to kind of enjoy the benefit that Monte Sereno is putting out there. Now, if we charge nothing at all, then people may make this a destination to come and charge their cars or leave them overnight, and so I think it's a balancing act, it looks like, on that.
And that, when the council that approved the budget, that included that was the general idea, it was to help promote overall EV use. But most cities originally, many of them offered this as a free service, but I don't know of anyone that's doing that anymore.
Is this a fast charger, or is this the 8-hour charger that takes 8 hours to charge the car?
Well, it's definitely not the tier, what's the top one, tier 1? I don't know, I get them backwards, tier 1,
Yeah, there's no
tier 3.
Yeah, it's 220 volts times 32 amps, which is 7.7
So that's an 8-hour
watts,
charge,
right?
yeah.
So it's just based on how big your battery is after.
Yeah, it's not intended to, for a vehicle that's all electric to give a full charge in any quick fashion.
It's not the Tesla fast charger, okay.
Would it be worthwhile to register it with the charge point system? Would there be any benefit to that?
Well, when we looked at choices, ChargePoint was one of them, but overall the ChargePoint chargers are considerably more expensive. So we did not use that system, but there are, which we are starting to register it. There are where you can go online to see where EV charging sites are that aren't just by individual company. And I believe, I'm not sure if we have already registered. Yes, we've already registered with those sites. So it does show up beyond the Liberty plug-in, which is the company that we're using.
So once we actually enroll this charger and get this program going, is there tracking by sort of user number or something like that? Are we going to be able, since we're subsidizing this, are we going to be able to tell if one person is monopolizing the resource versus someone else, like someone from Rose Avenue? At $1 an hour, I'm going to go buy an electric car and just park my car out here. It's a great rate, right? So
Well, we already have restrictions on, technically on parking overnight and on weekends.
But will we be able to track usage
I
to the
don't know,
user
actually.
level?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
I guess we can revisit all that in the next 3 months or something. If it looks like it's being abused, we can take a look at it. But
I
at
mean,
this
right now,
time,
there's no charge at all,
Nobody's doing anything.
and I have not noticed any abuse
Okay.
at all.
In fact, I only see one car out there. So,
All right,
okay,
let's
so let me see where we're at. So are there any other discussions from the council? Oh, one comment I had is, I think one of the things we need to look at is this charging station maybe with Teslas. So if you go down to Los Gatos, you can actually charge on a Tesla charger for free. So we should actually look at that, and Tesla subsidizes the charges.
We could do that.
So that's just, something you ought to look at. Okay, are there any other questions from the council?
No questions, just some comments when we get to that.
Comments?
Okay, so,
Comments about user and regulatory fees, right?
yes.
Yes.
So I did hear what the citizens are saying, that this came out of the blue and confused people. There was no outreach, there was no information. It comes up as an increase in some sort of fees, which may or may not affect them. And again, we're here to try to create fewer of these surprises. I think the council was also surprised in a sense about this coming up and no outreach other than putting it on the agenda, nothing going out on Nextdoor, these kinds of things. I think the reason for it is that this is a pretty straightforward step adjustment to a fee that is not on the general public. It's to people who are applying for very specific permits. And we're talking about 3%. We're talking about recovering $25,000 to $29,000 through those fees, which would otherwise be taken out of our general funds as an additional taking from our general funds and money not available for streets or for other purposes here. So I hear what people are saying. At the same time, I wanted to highlight this and find out about this because, why are we going to spend $20,000 or $30,000 every year in order to raise fees the appropriate amount so we don't shock people when we raise them once every 3 years or 5 years or 20 years as kind of been done in the past, but instead take them in a reasonable step and only spend a reasonable amount, the $1,500 to get the CPI adjustment, and then take a look at the specific fees and do what we're doing tonight, which is, as a council, look at them and say, is there anything in here that we as a council think shouldn't be going up, rather than thinking, should they go up more? Because should they go up more, we're going to have to justify with a very expensive study to make sure that we don't go over. We're conservative, we're under, we have to adjust these fees occasionally, and it's really just keeping them on a smooth line here. So I'm all for adjusting them, and I think the CPI is a reasonable number. I have a couple of fees I'd like to bring up that I want to consider taking down to zero if appropriate, and if people agreed that we're going forward at all, rather than if people, maybe we should put this out here first, if 3 or more council members say, put this off for a week, hear more input about it, and then make a decision. I'm not against that, although I don't think I think the input from people will be a great big yawn, because I don't think anybody who cares about these fees on an individual basis is going to come here and speak out and say, I'm really frustrated that my planning review permit's going from $150 to $156. I'd rather that $6 be carried by my neighbors as a community, so hold my fee down. But there are fees that I think we've correctly not adjusted, like the tree fees. We want people to get rid of specific trees. We don't want that to be a problem. We've got a whole bunch that are in the free layer, and then the larger ones that are at $100, and we're holding that. And so it looks like, I mean, we're really putting our priorities out there by what we're not changing. There's one in particular that I don't understand, the special land use permit historic resource, $2,800 going up to $2,908. Is that something that Monte Sereno even has? This is on page 1, line 14C. Is this something we have? I see the word historic resource, and I say, why don't we support whatever a historic resource is by leaving it alone?
So we do have homes that are in the, they apply to be in the Mills Act. And if they want to do work on their homes, potentially they need to get a permit if their home qualifies.
Okay, and there's a whole recovery thing related to the Mills Act on how that works. So, okay, but that's potentially one that if we want to
So do you want to,
promote. Yeah.
rather than go through it this way, I mean, do you want to take a look at the fees again and then come back at the next council meeting to actually discuss what you're talking about after careful study?
I mean,
Is that what
like,
you guys
I
want to do, or do you?
I'm saying I don't have any problem with putting this off one meeting so that we can put it out to everybody and explain it. I don't think we'd need consulting to
I'm worried
come
about
back.
the date. Okay, are you thinking the same way?
No, you're saying there's some sort of a deadline on it?
No, I might have a
Oh,
if
no,
you wanted me back to present
we wouldn't,
to the
we
committee.
wouldn't need you back, I don't think, if we'd replay the tape from tonight if people needed to hear. You did a great explanation.
So our next council meeting is September the 3rd.
So, I mean, I don't have any trouble putting it off, posting these, the Exhibit A, and I think some of our citizens had trouble finding Exhibit A when the agenda was first posted. Put it out there, explain what this is, and if people want to come talk to us about it, great. Or if we want to redefine some priorities, that sounds good. So I guess I'd move to delay this one meeting with the idea that we get a little more input.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'd second that, yes.
Yeah, I took a quick look at that other resolution. I apologize for not looking at it in advance. The wording just seems a little bit different. It's not as same as what is there. And so, yeah, if we could, well, I'd like to take another look at the resolution wording also with respect to the previous resolution.
Okay, so we have,
Second stands.
we have a second? Andrea?
I have a second, yeah.
You
I
don't
have
have a second?
No, Liz seconded.
Yeah,
Councilmember.
so shall we vote?
I mean, I will respect you guys to move it along, but we've spent a lot of time on it, and there's a lot of work that the city council needs to do. Well, I appreciate the concern about delaying it and all that, but I think other stuff, other priority stuff gets shifted back. And this is a $23,000 issue. So if you really want to postpone it, let's postpone it, but we can't keep postponing things. We've got to make decisions at some point.
The only thing that I would add, and this is just for purely for information, particularly for newer folks, is that when we did the initial fee study, we actually had a very large public outreach component. We did a study session with the city council, to really get the community have time to look at it and to digest it more, and then to come and speak at the study session. And then based on the input at the study session, that's when we moved forward with the adjustments. And the reason why we did that was because we were really making major changes to our fee schedule, based on a sound basis. But yeah, we did do that at this time. I would say the reason why we did not do that this time was because this is really just a minor adjustment to the fee schedule and all the work that went into it before. Just as some background
Yeah,
information.
and I see Philippa saying, no, it's not minor. So,
Right,
so
and
it's
I
all
think
relative,
right?
right?
And I think,
So-
right, we
so
need to
let's
include that
move-
in the outreach.
Yes, so let's go ahead with what we have here, the motion in progress.
It's to continue. So, Councilmember Ralahi,
No,
Councilmember Labouvet,
This is to vote on the
Continue.
delaying? Yes.
Councilmember Luthold,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Lawler,
Yes.
Mayor Turner,
Yes.
So it passes 4-1.
Can we take a short break before we maybe just
Sure.
duck out?
So let's take a 10-minute break, 5 minutes? 5 minutes.
Excellent presentation.
Thank you very much.
Are we gonna do 10 first?
Let's reconvene to open session, please. I guess we have to wait for Terry. So can we move to item 10 and get this storm? Okay.
Yeah.
So let's move to item 10 for new business, and let's call on Jessica. The presentation of the Green Stormwater Infrastructure Plan.
I do have a presentation that Terry's pulling up. I'll go ahead and get started. Good evening, Mayor and council members. Thank you for moving my item up. I appreciate it. This item here is the approval of the Green Stormwater Infrastructure Plan. For those of you who are on council in 2017, the framework was approved by the council in September to begin this process. In that time, the West Valley Clean Water Program cities contracted with EOA to actually develop the plan. EOA is an environmental consultant that is used quite a bit in our stormwater program, both with the Clean Water Program and the Greater Santa Clara Valley Water Program. So here today we have Vishaka Arte with EOA, and she's going to give us a brief presentation on some of the regulatory background and green infrastructure benefits, and then I will follow up with some more specific information with the City of Monte Sereno's plan. Oh, yeah.
Good evening, everyone. As Jessica mentioned, I'm going to give a brief background on the Green Stormwater Infrastructure Plan, and also talk about what are the regulations that are driving this effort. So next slide, please. One more, please. So green stormwater infrastructure, also called green infrastructure sometimes, so I may use GSI or GI interchangeably throughout the presentation. These are stormwater management systems that use vegetation, soils, and natural processes to capture, treat, or infiltrate stormwater so as to reduce the quantity of pollutants and runoff flowing into our creeks and the bay. So it essentially leads to cleaner creeks and the bay. Next slide, please. So on the left, in this illustration, on the left, we have an illustration of GSI. On the right is gray infrastructure, or our traditional stormwater management systems, where runoff and pollutants flow over roofs, streets, paved surfaces, directly into our storm drain systems, and then straight to the creeks and ultimately to the San Francisco Bay without any treatment. On the left side, we have integrated some GSI features into the streetscape shown there. So there are rain barrels that are capturing runoff. There are rain gardens that are allowing runoff and pollutants to soak into the ground. We also are showing some pervious surfaces that allow runoff to soak into the ground. All of this reduces the amount of pollutants and the quantity of runoff flowing into the creek. Next slide, please. To give you a regulatory background on why this is required, so as some of you may know that the City of Monte Sereno has a stormwater permit. It's called the Municipal Regional Stormwater Permit. It applies to 76 cities, towns, and special districts in the Bay Area. All of these are in San Mateo County, Santa Clara County, Alameda, Contra Costa, and 2 places in Solano. So all of them have the same stormwater pollution prevention requirements, which range from public education and outreach to pesticide management, inspection of commercial facilities, to the newest one, which is green stormwater infrastructure. Monte Sereno participates in the Santa Clara Valley Urban Runoff Pollution Prevention Program, which is an association in Santa Clara Valley of all 15 cities and towns, 13 cities and towns, the County of Santa Clara and the Santa Clara Valley Water District. All of them work together to implement requirements in the permit. And locally, Monte Sereno, Los Gatos, Saratoga, and Campbell participated in the West Valley Clean Water Program Authority to coordinate local implementation. And Council Member Daniel DeBove represents Monte Sereno on the authority board. A specific provision of the MRP, provision C3J, requires that all municipalities develop and submit the Green Stormwater Infrastructure Plan. The plan is due to the board along with the annual reports on September 30th of this year. And as Jessica mentioned, a framework was approved back in June 2017. So this plan kind of takes the framework forward and really shows how the city will move to adopting green stormwater infrastructure in the next 20 years or so. What the GSI projects will, they will essentially be retrofitting existing public streets, roofs, and parking lots so that runoff is diverted to these GSI features, which range from vegetated areas, pervious pavements, rain gardens, infiltration facilities, and rainwater collection systems. I'll show a few pictures of these just to familiarize you with them in the next slide. Now, these systems have been in place as what we call as low-impact development techniques, which were required from certain projects above a certain size threshold, both public and private. So they've been in place since 2003. What this permit is now doing is taking it slightly above and beyond and requiring that cities and towns explore how they can be implemented in non-regulated projects. So look for opportunities in public lands where you can implement these. Single-family homes were exempt from these. They still are, and that's why you may not have seen much of LID in Monte Sereno. Some local examples of these techniques. There's a bioretention area in Rosita Park neighborhood, so it captures runoff from the street and the sidewalk. Next is Commodore Park, which has various type of pervious surfaces, pervious pavers, concrete, asphalt. It's kind of a demonstration of all the pervious surfaces that can be used. That's in San Jose. Next slide, please. Green roofs, we don't see too many of these, but this is a green roof at a First Community Housing location in San Jose. And then Martha Gardens Green Alley in San Jose. So this street used to get a lot of flooding. So what the city did was install an infiltration trench, which kind of the street flows into it, water soaks into it, and then they have not observed any flooding the last year. Next slide, please. And locally, I'm sure most of you are familiar with this project. It's kind of an extreme makeover project, as we call it. This is Hacienda Avenue in Campbell. This is how the street looked like before. The city decided to redevelop it as a green street. And next slide, this is how it looks like now. So in addition to parking, bike lanes, on the sides are the bioretention areas that collect runoff and allow it to soak into the ground. Just going over benefits quickly, I mentioned runoff reduction already. They do help reduce local flooding because of all the planting that happens in them. They lead to urban greening, climate change resiliency, and if designed correctly, they can also help with improved bike and pedestrian safety. A lot of these features are installed in bulb outs, as is shown in this picture here. So they kind of offer a buffer for pedestrians to cross the street. And this is an example, I think, from somewhere in San Mateo. Next, okay. So that's all that I wanted to talk about, and Jessica will go into the specifics of the city's GSI plan. Thank you.
So the plan that was included in your packet has several sections to it required by the permit. I'll briefly go over those sections. One was to identify areas of potential opportunities for suitability, taking into account slope, permeability of the soils, and then also prioritizing those identified spaces. Identifying updates for the general plan, getting suggested language. Our current general plan has some kind of broad statements about greening in the city. These statements for a general plan updates to be considered in the future would have more specifics about low-impact developments and stormwater treatments and future projects. Another section describes standard specification for these type of projects, more engineering type specifications. Next slide, please. Evaluating funding options, grants typically for capital projects, also potential fees or public-private partnerships are options for funding these GSI public projects. Another section, ensuring the legal mechanism to support the implementation of the plan, which is luckily already covered by our current municipal code, so no changes were needed there for this plan. It also establishes goals, like I said, that was required by the state to establish goals out until 2040. The goals included in our plan are pretty conservative and really takes into consideration the limited opportunities we have here, considering it's limited to our right-of-way, and basically this property is what city property is in the city of Monte Sereno. And then lastly, tools for tracking the projects, which was also developed by SWIVRP. So that is something, since we are a member agency, able to use for the tracking of any new projects we may have here in the city of Monte Sereno. Next slide, please. So like I said, a lot of our opportunities are pretty limited. This property would be something, if it ever redeveloped, could use some pavers or some kind of stormwater treatment as a potential green infrastructure project. Other opportunities would be in our right-of-way, specifically Winchester Boulevard, which would likely be a project that we would have to do in conjunction with Los Gatos and or other cities along the corridor to be really something that'd be effective as a GSI project. Parts of Vineland Avenue, and then potentially as a public parcel, Dave's Avenue Elementary, if at any time they were looking to do some type of renovation or project on their property, something we can partner, and it would count towards the city's green infrastructure areas. And then any other joint projects that may be identified in the future with the county or the city of Los Gatos or the town of Los Gatos or city of Saratoga. And so with that, if you have any questions, regulatory, Vishaka would probably be the best to answer those. Also, our executive director of the West Valley Clean Water Program Authority, Sheila Tucker, is here if you have any specific questions on the authority. And that concludes my presentation.
Anybody for questions?
A couple. First of all, the plan was long and detailed, and I didn't have time to read every word in it. But it sounds like we're not putting restrictions on private properties as to what they have to do in terms of being anything that's more than what the state is already requiring. Is that true? Or are we supposed to be are we in this document setting targets that are beyond what the state mandates for private property?
So for private properties, like Vishaka said earlier in her presentation, those have been regulated over a certain size, excluding single-family homes, have been regulated for quite some time. So some of those are considered GSI projects. It would count towards our target, but we would not be required to make any other properties who don't already meet those thresholds do extra.
And we're not doing anything to single-family homes in this at all in terms of what this document's talking about?
Correct.
Okay. The other question I have is, do we have some opportunities as we're looking at things like the streets that we're doing? Palos Verdes is already underway, but in the future, when we're doing full street redevelopment projects, number one, do we have opportunities to implement this? It didn't look like those types of projects were being targeted at all. And number two, if we do have some opportunities, is there free money somewhere to help us subsidize any of this that we might be able to implement as we do a project like Palos Verdes?
Sure. So definitely in capital improvements for streets in the future, there's GSI opportunities. The ones outlined on that on the graphic a couple slides back were just the ones that were identified as most likely things that would come up in the future, like Winchester Boulevard. But any other street that we do in the future, we can definitely incorporate GSI factors into that. As far as funding, time to time there is funding for going above and beyond, doing green infrastructure, that kind of thing in the scope of a larger project. There is funding for that periodically.
future if we're doing a $500,000 project. But by doing it greener, it's 700,000, but we can recover that money. That may be something we want to look into as we're budgeting some of these larger things.
A $1,000 project is an ADU in Monte Sereno.
Sorry, things like the Palo Verdes redevelopment. That's 500.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I just had a question. So I was having trouble getting from the table on page 32, which is sort of this scoring methodology, where this is just a list of opportunities that are currently in the planning pipeline. And it looks like there's some sort of notion of total area that's impervious or pervious now to how much GSI might potentially be added by the plan. So I guess just to reiterate, right now there's no requirement, right? But it doesn't also look like there's a guideline. Like, so if you're developing open lands, of course, that's all available for water to soak in. If you develop it, of course, there will be less, right? But is there some sort of, I didn't see any guidelines in terms of what percentage of area should be allocated to GSI, or?
Currently, there is no requirement in the permit that says a city or a town has to treat X amount of area with GSI. So we are just supposed to provide a plan that says how we will move towards GSI and kind of do, as you notice, project what we expect will be developed by GSI. But again, this is not a commitment. So the board just wants to see what effort cities are making right now. So there's no requirement currently to say you have to do one street or, retrofit 2 parcels or treat X amount of area. There's no requirement in the current permit for that.
In general, some of these are actually sort of net losses, right? So if you go from undeveloped land to developed land and your GSI is limited, then it's really a net loss, right? I didn't see.
Yes, it will be. But you will be, so if you're going from undeveloped land to developed, there is a threshold. So if you create more than 10,000 square feet of land, again, single family is exempt. So if there's any other property that's developing, they will have to treat it by GSI. They will have to implement low impact development techniques.
And so I guess in that table, we were trying to estimate, again, for Monte Sereno specific pipeline,
Yeah.
sort of the amount of GSI that might come online in next year's. And it looks like that's a required reporting, right?
Yes, you
And
have to give an
That
estimate
doesn't seem
of.
like that's in that table, or am I just missing a table? There's some other reporting mechanism
So
other
is
than.
this table 6-2 that you're talking about?
6-2, but then also, like, where does 6.2 plug in to what gets formally reported? Looks like there's a website somewhere that you guys have to report on. So then the following tables look like they're just more guidelines
So
in
the-
terms of prioritization, and then it looks
So the
like,
tables in the appendices?
yes.
Okay, so there's a whole process that we went through last year. It's called the Stormwater Resource Plan. So that was a planning document that was developed basin-wide, Santa Clara, for the entire Santa Clara Basin. And it was through a grant from the state. The Water District received it, and we helped develop the plan. And that plan identified opportunity areas throughout the valley where GSI is feasible. So those are the tables that are in the appendix. They kind of talk about what were the criteria to identify those areas, and then specifically for Monte Sereno, we've listed the opportunity areas.
Right, but it seems like it's a relative score versus total area of
Yes,
GSI
so,
that will
so
come
yes.
online.
So based on the criteria, each opportunity was assigned a score. So as you can see, depending on the land use, there's a table. If you look at Appendix A, that actually provides the scoring criteria. So there was a scoring from, depending on the parcel land use or depending on the slope, each opportunity area was awarded a score of from 0 to 5. And that kind of added up to the scores that you see in those tables. And that was for the stormwater resource plan. And the state said you have to come up with a prioritized list, prioritized rank list of opportunity areas. And what that does is when the state has any bond funding, you can apply for that bond funding. So that's what that scoring is for. So a higher score means that the project has a greater benefit, and a lower score means it can apply for grant funding, but the overall benefits are slightly lower.
So these scores of, say, 25, nominally 25, that seems like that's just not a great score. So compared to the rest of the state, that would be considered high-value targets or no?
I think there are some projects, so the bigger the project, the more benefits. So,
okay.
if somebody's proposing a regional project where 2 or 3 jurisdictions are getting together and doing something, that project kind of has a higher score. But the state, when we were developing, the state board staff kind of kept reiterating that even though, you don't have a high score, doesn't mean don't apply for a grant. We will evaluate each project, looking at, where it's coming from and what are the benefits. So they told us to rank, but they also told us not to focus too much on the rank. So it's
And the Appendix B, I guess these B1 through, these are specific tasks for our city. Is that
yes,
correct?
these are the opportunity areas for Monte Sereno.
So Jessica has to fill these out. Based on- Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
So that, for that, I mean, public buildings is one,
There's none.
school
There's
is
two.
one.
Yes.
Okay,
I think because the city of Monte Sereno has only one public building.
Correct.
Yeah. And that was identified as an opportunity area.
okay. Any other questions? Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve?
Motion buttons?
Oh,
What-
I
you do,
don't.
okay.
I do.
Oh, let me try that.
I do. I can make the motion.
I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Lawler, second by Councilmember Loophole.
Oh, I have a motion now. I don't have a vote, though.
Okay, Councilmember Alahi,
Yes.
Councilmember Lavouvet,
Yes.
Councilmember Loophole,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Lawler,
Yes.
Mayor Turner.
Yes. Okay, so let's move back to the consent calendar on item number 6.
What about number 9?
Public employees, medical and hospital care CalPERS. Right,
You have one other item before that,
I do?
which is the emergency.
Oh, so you don't want to, you don't want to handle this
Yeah, you
first?
pulled that one off, so it would technically would go at the end unless otherwise designated.
So next one is unfinished business, which is the part-time joint emergency services coordinator position. Terry?
I'll be very brief. As noted in the staff report, this was originally an item that was placed into the budget for discussion by the city council. And at the time, the city council requested that it be, not included in the budget pending additional information. So staff has provided additional information in the staff report, as well as the detailed job announcement that the town has issued. So we're back tonight to provide you with that information and to seek your decision on whether you want to be a partial funding for this joint position that would serve both communities, the town as well as the city of Monte Sereno.
So any comments from city council?
Yeah, I thought we discussed this pretty in detail at the planning session. I wasn't really in favor of adding any more additional overhead staff. And furthermore, there was even question of whether it was needed based on sort of current profile of what's needed. So.
Anybody else?
I was just curious as to why we would shoulder 30% of the bill when we're just a tenth of the size in square miles and population.
Well, I believe the original, you know, I don't have it right in front of me, but there was several components, and some of the components would not necessarily be an exact, 10% split. A good example of that would be, we do share one of the main things that we share with the town is the Emergency Operations Center, and the burden of staffing that and coordinating that and keeping that up to date. If we had to do that on our own, it would be enormously expensive. So we, there was some, I can't remember, I do apologize, I don't have that with me, but there was several components to it, and I worked with the assistant town manager. Some were 10%, some were 30%, but at the end of the day, the rough estimate was that it would be approximately a 70-30 split.
Okay. Yes, sir.
What is the emergency manager going to do? I think you outlined some of that, but if you can explain that.
Sure.
some
On
more.
page 2, I mean, the main things that they'll be in charge of is overseeing the maintenance and development of the emergency operation plan, and all the annexes are the additional ones. We have a plan, but it is woefully out of date, so that's one thing they would help us with. As I mentioned, the Joint Emergency Operations Center, there's currently not a person who's in charge of maintaining and developing it. The Emergency Operations Center has manuals, supplies. It has to be continually updated with different types of programs that are used by the emergency operations team. This person would be in charge of coordinating all of the training, making sure that all the individual staff members are, because many persons on staff, both the town and the city, are emergency operations personnel, and it does require a lot of training. And so they'd be in charge of coordinating that and offering that. The other thing is the maintenance of federal state mitigation reporting requirements and development of federal and state grant opportunities. Currently, we don't have anyone who's monitoring any of that or really, reaching out to various opportunities for us to be able to do that. And one of the most important parts, which is something that I do because we don't have anyone else, is liaisoning with all of the regional partners. There's 2 or 3 monthly meetings that emergency managers from all the other cities do attend, and they include briefings on best practices. Especially in the last year, there's been a whole lot of a discussion around the various fires that have happened in the Bay Area and California in general, how those were dealt with, lessons learned. So it would just, the main point of having a person like this, most cities have an emergency manager or emergency operations coordinator, is to be the central focus for making sure that all the different pieces around emergency management are being dealt with properly. And currently, for the city of Monte Sereno, I cover that as best I can, but as I've said during the budget study session, I don't feel I'm able to cover it well enough. And having an individual this is their area of expertise, in addition to the extra personnel, would be extremely helpful. And I think I also noted in the staff report, of course, that this is one of the primary goals is emergency and wildfire preparedness. So I believe that, we have a great opportunity here sharing this with the neighboring town. Otherwise, if we wanted to try to, have a person do this for us, it would be considerably more expensive. And those are kind of the main points.
Okay. Anybody else?
So I have a question for Terry. Where's Los Gatos on this? I mean, are they said $55,000 person? Are they in the process of recruitment and hiring?
They are correct. They are recruiting it. They are recruiting now.
Okay. So essentially, they're going to do this on their own, whether we want to do it or not. They're offering us for $16,000 the benefit of having that person dedicate
May I answer that? Because
Correct.
I was at the CERT preparedness where they talked about this. So Los Gatos is going to fund this part-time, right? Whether we're there or not. My concern with this is we really haven't figured out what Monte Sereno is going to do in terms of emergency preparedness, because we're not necessarily lacking in a representative. What we're lacking is citizens' involvement for ICPs, right, and CERT leaders. I think Los Gatos, the emergency preparedness for the fire department is doing a very good job for Monte Sereno at this point in time, given the number of people that we have involved. Monte Sereno has, 6 neighborhood watch groups. Los Gatos has 37. Monte Sereno has 1 ICP. Los Gatos has 18. So I think one of the things that we need to do is to hold this off until we get you guys involved in CERT and then understand what it is that we really need. Because once we hire a person, it's going to be difficult to say, do this, and to keep that person busy if we really don't have the citizens' involvement at this point.
Yeah, my view on this is if Los Gatos is going ahead with this anyway, then essentially, as they get their feet on the ground, I would foresee them coming here and essentially selling us on the deal, saying we are going to give you the following benefits by you kicking in X number. I don't care what it is, if it's $16,000 or $20,000 or $40,000. If Los Gatos says, we've already got this in place and we can share it with you, here's what it will cost you, and here's the benefits it's giving us, and it can give that to you too. I don't want to be the person who didn't spend $16,000 out of our budget of $4 million, and the wildfire comes through here, and because we weren't at the meeting, we're less prepared. Now, I know you guys are all on this with the wildfire preparedness. You need more citizen involvement. So I mean, I think Los Gatos is, before they hadn't even done this, now they're doing it. Their scope of work is coming out here, and I think we're in the position to kick in if that person offers us something. Why should we be sending 2 people to these meetings every month if one person going for both cities brings both cities back the information we need? There's an efficiency to that and frees up our staff to do other things. So I think as soon as Los Gatos implements, they can sell it to us. We're not against it. We just need to know exactly where the benefit comes to us. And I'm not trying to increase certainly Terry's work on this or the city manager's work, but or to create our own substitute for this. Just make sure that we're getting something for it. Don't want to just throw our money into the Los Gatos pot and have this person, basically, I mean, they're 1,000 hours. They're not going to be giving us 300 hours over the course of a year in any kind of direct benefit. There may be indirect benefit of attending meetings.
Yeah, and I'm not really even sure how many meetings they go to.
It's only the one that they don't go to
Yes.
that is the concern to me, because, I mean, that is invaluable information or grant money or something if there is some solution that they bring back to us.
Okay, so
Comment.
do we
Comment?
have a motion?
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm obviously concerned that we're going to continue another item on this agenda. I mean, you're talking about wildfire and emergencies, and you don't know when something is going to come around. I mean, those certifications are going to be helpful, but you still need somebody leading the charge on it. And if we can get someone who is going to be totally involved, they can bring information that we don't have, and hopefully come up and further our agenda for making sure that Monte Sereno does not become a victim of a big wildfire. It's only $16,000. It's like an insurance policy almost that you're getting once they get them appointed. And I think we will have the flexibility. If we don't like the person as to what they're doing, we can say we don't want to do this anymore. But
And I wanted to
yeah.
second that point, which is I understand this would be a one-year contract,
Oh,
and
yeah.
we wouldn't have to renew it. And if that's the situation, I mean, I'm all for essentially say, insurance policy of $16,000, talking about it is gonna cost us more time than that we could put into something that really matters, like objective standards.
Yeah, so we should move forward with it. I don't think it's a budget item that's gonna hurt Monte Sereno. It's an insurance policy, and you need not delay it, because it may take 2 or 3 months for this person to get on board and figure out what's going on out there. And if we take 3 to 6 months trying to figure out where our certifications are going and have this item on the agenda again, I don't know what new information will come to you.
Well, I think Los Gatos, though, will hire this person.
Yeah, I know.
Right? No matter what. So then there's a ramp-up time, that person can come up to speed. And then later on, if we decide we need it, then we add on to that person's
All right.
time.
So in
But
6
to hire somebody right now, where we're not sure how much of it will be useful to us, because if I look at the job description that you gave, it's basically for Los Gatos. There's nothing in there that's Monte Sereno specific.
And I think furthermore, that, you know, at the end of the day, if there is an emergency, the emergencies are largely coordinated by police and fire, right? And we contract those things out. I met previously with Jackie Rose, who is the community coordinator at the police department. That's a full-time position. You know, she is already coordinating between CERT training and between
Neighborhood watch.
private watch, or the neighborhood watch stuff. I know you're kind of putting this out as an insurance policy, but, you know, you're adding staff overhead, and it's, okay, it's real money, right? We can spend that $16,000 on roads or something else, but, you know, I don't really see what value we get for it. It's just another head that's going around, you know, I don't know what they're doing. It doesn't add a direct value. We already have police and fire coordinating, you know, these important emergency services. So I would like to see what comes of, you know, I'm not saying postpone this, I'd say kill it, and then we'll revisit in the next budget session, would be my suggestion. And if Los Gatos actually, you know, can come up with a list of bullets that says, yeah, this is the best thing since sliced bread, then I'm all for it, but.
I think there's a difference between the police emergency response and the fire response. The idea isn't that you just have people available when it's time to, when an emergency happens. This is a person who will hopefully come up with plans that will prevent emergencies from happening, or come up with plans on how to make routes and other escape routes and do other things, and coordinate later things.
That's the function of this person. I mean.
Explain to me, Terry, is that the function or not?
Well, it's a person that's basically coordinating all the various efforts of the
See,
city.
this is a clerical function. This is not a.
It is not a clerical function. This is
I disagree.
You know, the council asked me to bring it back. I brought it back. If you, please just, you know,
Okay.
let me know if you want me to let them know we'll start the process of an MOU or not. I will say one last time that I do believe that, you know, this person would add significant value to our wildfire and emergency preparedness. And given the state of wildfires and emergencies that we are seeing in the last few years, I, as your city manager, see this as money well spent.
What I would like to see is basically a job description for Monte Sereno, not necessarily just Los Gatos. It's a general job description, so.
So what we could do is we could, you could authorize us to negotiate with Los Gatos, the MOU, and then bring the MOU back to you, and in it, it would have the specific services. So we're not actually hiring this person. We are just contracting for services with the town of Los Gatos for emergency preparedness, and we can define what that is in the MOU.
It would be somewhat similar to the way we contract for police services.
Well, since we're not part of the hiring process, why wouldn't we just let Los Gatos hire them and then have them come to us and see how it goes with them, and then have them come to us, and then we can meet them and have them present what they've accomplished so far, and then we can jump on at that point.
Well, and even to further that, I would like it boiled down to specific deliverables. So, for example, if it's too time-consuming to update the actual plan, then, you know, why don't we try to contract out the updating of the actual plan as a deliverable, just like we just did with stormwater.
And we certainly
that
could do
would,
that.
That would, to me, would have value if we actually have some specific deliverables against it, not just a warm body to sort of say that
Yes,
they're working on it.
and that's basically why I have a problem with this, because when I look at the job description, it doesn't really describe what this person is going to do for Monte Sereno. It describes what this person may do for Los Gatos. We still need to look at it to see how successful they are. And rather
I
than-
like the pay-as-you-go model. Like,
Yeah.
if there are specific deliverables that you want to take off your plate, let's take those off your plate and contract those out, just as we contracted out, study.
We can even contract some of those deliverables out to Los Gatos instead of having to pay somebody full, that percentage of time to come in. For example, the meetings, we can have somebody say, okay, go to this meeting. It's a couple of hours. And we pay them on a time and materials basis rather than paying an employee. Because an employee would be very difficult to undo.
But we're looking at it as a contract. So
Yeah.
that's, I mean, it's never been an employee, and we're not committing to a share of an employee. We're only saying we would sign on for a period.
Correct, and the town itself is only doing it a limited period too. So whoever's hired knows it starts out as a limited period.
Yeah,
two-year
but you set an
contract.
expectation, right? So it's a third of a person, and then, the next budget round comes around, and what are you gonna do, lay that guy off a third?
We would just
Okay.
cancel, we would just terminate the contract. So there would be termination provision, whether it's a year, 30 days, 60 days, that would be negotiable.
I mean, I think we got to a good, maybe compromise where if they develop an MOU around specific deliverables and go ask Los Gatos for a quote on that, see if they can do that kind of work, maybe that's the compromise.
I like the idea of Mayor Pro Tem Lawler here, where they come later on and present to us what they've done, and then we decide later on if, hey, is this a successful project or not? I like that idea.
How far is that gonna go, Terry, with Los Gatos? You think they'll wanna come to us and tell us what they're doing?
Well, I would say without an indication from the council that you want to move forward with it, I doubt they're gonna spend the time on an MOU, so I will ask. But beyond that, I mean, I assume they're going, to hire pretty quickly. What exactly is it you would like me to have?
In fact, he already said we hired somebody.
Well, I don't think they've hired them yet. I think they're in the process of it.
Okay, so in that case, we can add on or later on to this person that they already have. If it's successful, this person they can make it a full-time position with our 30% or whatever it is.
I guess that's gonna be the other question, which is.
We're done.
Do they have, is this person going to have bandwidth to handle us? And if they go on the job for Los Gatos, and we haven't yet committed, are they gonna be able to say, oh yeah, these are transferable things, I'm going to these meetings, I can easily incorporate another 3,500 citizens? Or are they gonna say, hey, I'm already beyond my budget of hours just doing what Los Gatos is telling me to do, thanks but no thanks, in terms of bringing you guys in and having you pay for it?
There's likely to be a lot of overlap. I mean, like I said, the Emergency Operations Center is one of the primary things that we share, and they're gonna have that person do the duties associated with that, whether we're contributing or not.
That Emergency Operations Center, that's the CERT function that's already,
No,
there's a
this
process
is
around that
no,
already?
this is a separate facility that is set up as an operations center in the event of an emergency.
And it's in Los Gatos.
Yeah, it's over at the police department. And the city is extremely lucky that we're able to share that with them, because if we had to have our own emergency operations center, it is a huge cost. You have to have it, you have to have, computers, it has to be interconnected with all of the different partners. There's a lot that goes into it.
And Los Gatos is not saying that you're not going to be able to use it. In fact, they've
still
already
part of the
said that
EOC.
we're part of it, so.
And we share that. It's logical because we have a joint police department and we share the same fire department. So it makes
Exactly.
total sense.
And Jackie Rose has done an excellent job, like you said, in terms of coordinating for Los Gatos and Monte Sereno on Neighborhood Watch, on CERT, and all the ICPs. So I think what we ought to do is since you're going for CERT training, both of you, take a look at that, and then we can decide later, after you come from training, on what it is that we still need.
Sounds like this person will be hired and we can meet them as well.
Then you can meet them as well. Okay, so where are we? Do I have a motion?
Do you need a motion?
Don't
or
need a
not?
motion because you're not taking any action.
Okay,
You're not gonna do
So
anything. so-
I will inform them that the city council has no interest in sharing the cost. I'll let them know right away.
let's move to the next order of business, which is committee and commission's report.
You do have the PERS item.
Oh, yes, the first item now. That's item number 6. Public Employees Medical and Hospital Care Act.
So I guess I'd like to comment on that, just continue the discussion that took it off of the consent calendar and brought it here for more discussion. I think this that's being presented to us is a technical correction of a name, and it's kind of a bit tedious that if we're delaying the technical correction of the name because we have another agenda, which is to look at the benefits we offer and whether future benefits may change in some way. So I would say to the council, we can make it clear that we're not committing that this is what we're doing forever into the future in terms of offering benefits. We're correcting the name right now. And we need to put on our agenda to study the question of benefits, which is going to be part of our salary and benefit survey. We've made commitments to benefits to existing employees. We may or may not have any ability to modify those. Probably we don't. And then are we going to look at future benefits and changes based on our benefits study? So I think that for tonight, my recommendation would be that we pass the name change that we're being called for with the clarification that we are going to look at salary and benefits as a whole package. This is not a commitment by this council to fully fund forever into the future and rubber stamp this.
So can you make that into a motion?
So I guess, Kristen, is there any way for us to reflect that this is for purposes of the name change only, and the council will be looking at overall salary and benefits in the review?
So you can include that in your motion. PERS was very clear that we cannot modify the resolution itself, but you could include it in your motion. So you could move to approve the resolution, in addition, indicate the city council's desire to continue to look at this item going forward, and they're not bound by the current commitments into the future.
So
I'm-
moved.
I'm not sure I understand. what you- Wait a minute.
Quick, seconded, of course.
So we're approving it with the name change, but maintaining the right to change it in the future if we need to.
Right, so you're just approving the resolution, which only changes the name, and you're indicating your interest in looking into this matter and not being bound by the current contribution levels in the future.
Okay, can,
Oh, sorry.
sorry,
Did
go ahead.
CalPERS provide this resolution
They
and
did.
this title?
And very clearly said no changes.
Don't change that.
So what happens with, especially in the Resolved A, where municipalities don't choose to fund in this way?
So I believe, and I would need to consult with PERS, but I believe that the employer contribution is set out by statute, and then each individual member of PERS can determine how to split that contribution amount. But I would need to consult with PERS on that matter, because we do have the ability to change the contribution amounts. There's an employer share, an employee share. I believe PERS looks at it all as the city's, the employer's duty, and then it's up to the employer to figure out how to divvy it up. But I would need to confirm that.
So
We're
can-
going to have to confirm that as
Correct.
we look at a new
Right.
hire,
Correct.
there's a potential, or we look at a change to the benefits plan as to what we can do and can't do in this, because we may have committed to it related to certain positions or certain employees, and we might or might not have the ability to do it. And just like we need to investigate the concept of whether we have to offer PERS to every employee or whether there's an alternative more like 401K. Chances are PERS demands that 100% of your employees be covered in certain ways. So we're going to have to study that as part of our study of what we can and can't do if we are going to change anything. We do what we do currently.
I've seconded the motion. And basically, again, it's just a name change, it's nothing else. So whatever else we want to do, we should do. But this, it doesn't change anything. We have existing contracts with PERS, and that's what we're honoring. and
So what
abiding.
are we looking at here? I just don't understand the motion that's in front of us. So are we adopting the resolution regarding blah, blah, blah that reflects the change in the name? And are we also saying that we're looking at all the other things in the resolution as well? We're approving that?
By so adopting, we're not committing to not changing our coverage in future.
So we're
We are
reserving the
simply
right to change.
changing the name
Change.
as required by PERS now.
The resolution merely spells out the current condition. If you wanted to change that in the future, you can.
Okay.
This resolution is just telling you what the current situation is and reflecting the name change only. That's the only change.
Okay.
Could you reread the motion?
It's clear as mud.
So the motion would be to approve the resolution and to acknowledge that the resolution does not bind the council in the future in terms of the contribution amounts.
Yes.
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 Yes. See, we're an easy group.
Thank you for getting it done.
Okay, so now can we go to committee commission reports? Anyone?
Mine are
No?
all on vacation.
Council member comments?
Yeah, I'll just reiterate the comment that we really need to light a fire under the salary survey. If we can get that done before 12 weeks, and it's not, again, the salary survey, we have employees that weren't addressed in that 5% step function, and I'd really like to know if we're competitive or not, and so I think that we'd like to see that salary survey as soon as possible. Secondly, the expansion of the site and architecture and the objective standards, really would appreciate some kind of an effort estimate and schedule on those two. And again, as Sean was saying in the beginning of the year, or in the budget session, we really want to get that objective standards done in early November. So I hope that that's coming up very quickly. And then lastly, I really do want to get into the, and using the previous audit of the financial results and get into this pension liability issue and understand that in more depth. Maybe you can bring an expert to explain these obligations, or write a staff report or something. I think that would be very useful.
Anything else? I do have one comment, and that has to do with the resolutions and all of this that the mayor signs. What I'd like to see is perhaps a box on each page so that we can initial it going forward. Right? Because for example, when I look at some of this, there could be blank pages, like Exhibit A. And I don't want to have to go back later on and figure out, hey, what was that I signed? So that's just best practice, right?
It's a good idea to have a footer on each page. for issues.
So, city manager's report?
The only thing I have is just a reminder of the city picnic, which Andrea can fill us in on the details on that. Are we all set?
We all know what we're supposed to do.
It's this Saturday.
Wow.
Usually we have a few stragglers show up, so I think we're going to have similar numbers as we had last year, if not more.
Good. Yeah, and then at the picnic, I plan to get up there and welcome the citizens, and I want you guys to be there with me. It's not going to be a long speech, just probably 5 minutes, and we're going to point out who our guests are at the table, right? Our partners, like CERT is going to be there, Silicon Valley Clean Energy, and whoever. So, and we're going to help you clean and prepare.
Yay.
Okay. Future agenda items? None? Oh my gosh, this is it. We're moved to adjourn. Our next meeting is September the 3rd.